Chapter 1. Holy Soul Village. It was just dawn. On a hillside not far from the village, two young men were sitting cross-legged facing the rising sun. As they breathed in and out, purple mist was drawn in from the horizon. The two young men stared at the sky, with purple aura visible on the surface of their pupils. In a flash, the purple air dissipated and the two men's eyes became brighter. The method of eye training, purple demonic pupil. As the first ray of morning sun rose, the purple mist in the sky dissipated. Li Xian blinked his eyes and slowly exhaled a breath of foul air. Xiao San, I'm fine, how about you? I'm fine too. Tang San put his hands down, exhaled deeply, and then looked over here. His eyes were bright and transparent, hiding a faint smile. A little fast. Li Xian twisted his slightly sore neck, snapped his hands together with a slight sound, then pushed forward and stood up. Beside him, Tang San also stood up. If someone heard the conversation between the two, they would definitely find it incredible. Because this steady-sounding tone actually came from two children who looked only 5 or 6 years old. The boy on the left with short black hair and healthy-looking tan skin is none other than Xiao San. His full name is Tang San. The taller, fair-skinned, handsome young man on the right is called Li Xian, and he is not a local. It's a long story. Li Xian came from a blue planet and traveled to the Holy Soul Village with his memories. Li Xian never thought that he would become friends with Tang San. Li Xian was not unfamiliar with this world. He knew that this was a world where people could upgrade and everyone could awaken their martial spirit when they were 6 years old. The martial soul is very important and affects the soul warrior's life. With a good martial soul and good innate soul power, cultivation will go smoothly and the future will be bright. If you awaken a martial soul that cannot be cultivated, that would be bad. Li Xian knew that Tang San's martial spirits were Blue Silver Emperor and Clear Sky Hammer. However, he still didn't know what kind of martial soul he would have, and he had never seen his parents since he traveled through time. Although the Holy Soul Village had produced a soul saint, most of the villagers had useless martial souls that were unable to practice. As for Li Xian's parents whom he had never met, their martial arts spirits must not be very good either. Therefore, Li Xian felt somewhat uncertain about the upcoming martial soul awakening next week. It would be very uncomfortable if the one awakened was a useless martial spirit that could not be cultivated. Of course, while he was worried, Li Xian also had some expectations about it. After all, as a time traveler like Tang San, he believed that the awakening of his martial arts soul would not be too bad. At worst, it is just a weak martial spirit that can be cultivated. Li Xian clenched his fists at this moment. It would be nice if it was a hammer. Li Xian, how is your Xian Tiangong practice going? The two men got up and walked down the mountain, carrying the firewood they had picked up and walking towards the village together. Tang San turned his head and asked softly. Because both of them were reborn, Li Xian was able to pee together with Tang San, the little adult, and they could be considered good friends. Tang San generously taught Li Xian the Xian Tiangong, Purple Demon Eye and Xian Yuhan that he practiced in the Tang sect in his previous life. Parenthesis, this isn't free. You know, Tang San regards the memory of rebirth as the biggest secret. Anyone who knows this will die. The reason why he is so generous is because Li Xian saved Tang San once in an accident. Because of this favor, Tang San can be so generous. According to what you said, I should have reached the 5th level of the 1st level, but it's a bit slow. Li Xian said so. Xian Tiangong is similar to a kind of internal energy that can strengthen the body and cultivate the spirit. Li Xian understands that in this world, the power cultivated by Xian Tiangong is actually called soul power. He has soul power level 5. After practicing for a year, it's great to be able to reach such a fast speed. Tang San praised with surprise. Li Xian was not like him, as he was an inner sect disciple of Tang sect in his previous life and a genius at that, so it would not be difficult for him to reincarnate and cultivate a new technique. In just a few years, he successfully reached the 1st level of perfection and touched the bottleneck. It's just, I don't know why I can't break through this bottleneck. Tang San said this inside helplessly. His Xian Tiangong has been stuck at the 1st level for a long time. Unable to break through. Don't worry, I think this has something to do with martial arts training. You'll know when you awaken your martial arts next week. Li Xian patted Tang San on the shoulder. He knew that Tang San's Xian Tiangong could not break through because his soul power reached level 10 but he did not absorb any soul rings. Every 10 levels of soul warrior training is a level. Correspondingly, if you want to break through the levels, you need to hunt soul beasts and obtain a soul ring when each stage is completed. Soul rings represent the strength of soul masters. 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, or even 100,000 years. The longer you hunt soul beasts, the higher the quality of the soul rings you absorb. Li Xian traveled through time and space and knew some basic information about this world in detail. However, although he knew the settings, he was not clear about the final plot. Because he didn't watch the ending. Taking his eyes away from Tang San, Li Xian felt a strange sensation in his heart. If he remembered correctly, Tang San's reputation seemed to be very bad in the end. But as of now, he didn't feel that there was anything wrong with Tang San. Soon, a week passed. The annual Martial Spirit Awakening Day has arrived in the Holy Soul Village. Boom boom boom. Early in the morning, two figures, one old and one young, stood outside the door of a wooden house. Xiao San, Grandpa is here to pick you up. Village Elder Jack brought Li Xian to stand at the door of Tang San's house and shouted towards the house. Perhaps because of his dislike for Tang Hao, old Jack deliberately increased the force with which he banged on the door. Village chief, is Tang San really not going? Li Xian, who was following the village, asked puzzledly. This. The village chief was speechless. He informed Tang San about the awakening of his martial spirit last week. But he was rejected and kicked out by Tang Hao that day. This time, the village elder Jack was not very clear about the specific situation. Ah, Tang Hao is such a useless person. He is in such a state and still wants to delay Xiao San. It's really infuriating. Old Jack cursed, and the skin on his face twisted together as he thought of this, and he gritted his teeth. I'll call for you. If that doesn't work, I'll go there secretly with Xiao San. Li Xian knew the temper of the village chief, so he pulled him aside and knocked on the door gently, intending to call Tang San out in a polite manner. Squeak. At this moment, the wooden door suddenly opened and Tang San walked out by himself. Sorry to have kept you waiting, Li Xian, Grandpa Jack, let's go. Tang San smiled politely. At the same time, a deep and heavy voice sounded in the room, go ahead, don't delay the lunch meal. Tang San immediately turned around and responded. The village elder, old Jack, was stunned for a moment. When he came to his senses, a smile appeared on his old face. He rubbed Tang San's head and then led him out. Come on, Xiao San, it seems that Tang Hao has thought it through. Soul awakening is a big deal and cannot be delayed. Li Xian also casually came to Tang San with his arm around his shoulder. I thought you weren't going. How could that be? Tang San scratched his head and said, subconsciously closing the door. When the door was closing, Li Xian could see through it. In the dark and messy room, there was a middle-aged man with inappropriate clothes and his face covered by messy hair, half lying on the table, drunk. Title Douluo. Tang Hao. As a huge organization, the Soul Hall has branches directly located in the village. Every year, the Soul Palace would send people to villages large and small to help children awaken their martial souls for free. On the way, the old village chief briefly introduced the Soul Palace to Li Xian and Tang San, and talked about some things that needed attention. Tang San listened calmly. Li Xian sighed in his heart, big powers love to monopolize resources and restrict the cultivation of the lower classes, but Spirit Hall not only does not do that, but helps the weak and gives every child a chance to cultivate. There is nothing wrong with this approach. If there were no Spirit Hall, countless children with potential on Douluo Continent would lose the opportunity to practice every year. This year, a total of 9 children in Fighting Soul Village underwent martial soul awakening. Led by the village chief, Li Xian and Tang San arrived at the Spirit Hall at the last moment. When they arrived, there were already children queuing inside. Li Xian saw a handsome and tall young man standing in front of the children, looking at them. The young man had an extraordinary temperament, with a hint of nobility and pride. The village elder Jack exchanged a few words with him, then immediately turned around and handed the venue to the young man. My name is Su Yun Tao. Next, I will awaken you one by one. I will summon your martial spirits later. Don't be afraid. Wait until the village chief leaves. The handsome young man spoke and introduced himself. What surprised Li Xian was that Su Yun Tao's attitude was very gentle when he spoke, without any airs of a superior at all. Chapter 2. Su Yun Tao took out 6 black stones and a blue crystal ball and arranged them in a hexagon. Lone wolf, possessed. Then Su Yun Tao let out a low roar, and a green light enveloped his entire body. His body shape began to change, his eyes became dark green, his index finger turned into a sharp claw, his hair was exposed, and his flesh began to swell. 2 spirit rings also spread out and rose from under his feet, one white and one yellow. Is that a spirit ring? Li Xian's eyes lit up. Ah! The first boy who awakened his martial spirit was frightened and subconsciously wanted to run away. Don't move. Su Yun Tao grabbed the child and said, I told you I want to release my soul power. This is my lone wolf martial soul. If any of you can become a soul master in the future, you can also use the same ability. After this explanation, the boy really stopped struggling. In the room, many children stared at Su Yun Tao's back after his transformation with eager expressions on their faces. They couldn't help but become interested in the soul master, with sparkling eyes. Tang San's eyes widened, and Li Xian clicked his tongue in anticipation. As the saying goes, seeing is believing. When he saw the martial spirit possessing his body with his own eyes, the visual impact was a bit shocking to him. Su Yun Tao transformed into a lone wolf more than 1 meter tall, exuding a cold and dark aura. In front of him, Li Xian could feel the huge gap in strength between soul masters and ordinary people. The martial soul is indeed magical. Here, Su Yun Tao clapped his hands quickly, and the crystal ball in front of him was moved, and then turned into a layer of golden light, covering the child in front of him. The expression of the boy who was shrouded in the darkness gradually calmed down, and he even looked a little dull. Golden light began to flow into his body. The boy trembled slightly and wanted to scream but couldn't. Su Yun Tao gave an order, directing the boy to stretch out his right hand. The boy stretched out his trembling palm, and suddenly, all the light points gushed out, and in an instant, a sickle floated in his palm. The sickle seems like a phantom, but it really exists, floating gently up and down. Li Xian blinked slightly, and a sickle really floated out of the boy's palm, as if it had materialized. Su Yun Tao frowned, weapon spirit, sickle? It can barely be used as a weapon. Let me test your soul power. If you have soul power, you can become a combat soul master even if your weapon soul is a sickle. The boy in front of him was a little at a loss, and gave him a timid, inquiring look. Su Yun Tao handed him the crystal ball and then motioned for him to stretch out his hand. The boy stretched out his tender little hands, and he and Su Yuntao pressed their wolf claws on the upper and lower parts of the crystal ball respectively. After a moment, the crystal ball showed no reaction, and Su Yuntao was a little disappointed. You don't have soul power, so you can't become a soul master. Go aside first. Li Xian watched the boy walk aside dejectedly, his hands clenched nervously. No way, it's so similar to the plot he knows. Is it possible that Tang San is the only one who can measure the spirit power in the end? Next. On the field, the awakening of martial spirits was still going on, and the same scene continued to play out. Most of the children queuing in front of Li Xian had already gone up. Unfortunately, their martial souls are all of the type of farm tools. Not only do they not have beast martial souls, they also have no soul power at all. When it was the seventh child's turn, Li Xian's turn came next. Xiao San, how about you go first? Li Xian coughed, then pulled Tang San in front of him, letting the Son of Luck cushion him, maybe his martial spirit could get better. Tang San didn't say anything, he wouldn't mind this kind of thing. Here, after Su Yuntao helped the eighth child complete his awakening, he looked a little tired. This time, the awakened martial soul was finally no longer a farm tool. The girl's martial soul actually changed. A light blue grass appeared and swayed gently in her palm. Blue-silver grass. Su Yuntao frowned slightly. This kind of wild grass can be seen everywhere in the village. It is so common that it cannot be more common. Apart from its tenacious vitality, it has almost no other functions. Without attack or defense, even if you have soul power, it is difficult to practice. It is considered a standard useless martial soul. Su Yuntao's next words sounded cold and heartless. Yet, the girl's eyes dimmed. For martial souls like blue-silver grass, the accompanying soul power is mostly zero after awakening. If an ordinary person awakens this kind of martial soul, he will basically have no chance of becoming a soul master. Next. After the girl left, Su Yuntao didn't say much, and immediately looked at Tang San behind him. Li Xian felt that there was no space in front of him, and Tang San was already standing in the center of the 6 black stones. So fast. Feeling his chest pounding, Li Xian watched Tang San begin his martial spirit awakening. As expected, as Su Yuntao's soul power was activated, Tang San's body was pulled, and his martial soul soon appeared in front of everyone in the room. The brightness of the explosion dimmed the eyes of everyone present. Su Yuntao was slightly surprised, and actually felt an extremely powerful soul power. However, when the dust settled, he was soon disappointed. A blue grass appeared in Tang San's palm, just like the girl before, martial spirit, blue-silver grass. However, he was so exhausted at the moment that he did not notice that in Tang San's other palm, a black hammer was gently swinging, floating in that small hand, emitting a powerful aura. Li Xian raised his eyebrows slightly, and saw that after Tang San noticed this change, he immediately clenched his palm and hid the secret in his palm so that no one else could discover it. The 6th one. If Li Xian hadn't known the situation, most people wouldn't have noticed it. Another useless martial spirit. Su Yuntao was extremely disappointed. This year, not a single child in the Holy Soul Village successfully awakened their martial spirit. The gap just now made him feel dull. You know, if the children here successfully awaken their martial spirits, not only can they obtain rewards from the spirit hall for their achievements, but they can also make friends with these simple children. It's a win-win situation. However, Tang San's martial spirit is blue-silver grass. What's the use of cultivating this kind of martial spirit? Uncle, you haven't tested my soul power yet. Seeing Su Yuntao driving him away, Tang San immediately reminded him. No need, I have never seen anyone with this kind of useless martial spirit show soul power. Su Yuntao shook his head in extreme disappointment. Let me try, uncle. Seeing Tang San's persistence, Su Yuntao sighed softly, and then he thought that this child seemed to be really different from others. All right. Su Yuntao said as he handed the blue crystal to Tang San. Tang San followed the method he had taught him before, and as he placed his palm on the crystal ball, the room shook violently for an instant. Then, a dazzling blue light lit up everyone's vision, and the light quickly spread throughout the room. The blue crystal was like a gem that had been shone, emitting a faint blue halo. Oh my god, it's actually innate full soul power. Su Yuntao was shocked. If you want to practice after your martial soul awakens, you must have a companion soul power greater than level 0. However, the amount of soul power is generally related to your martial soul. Often the more powerful the martial soul is, the higher the accompanying soul power is. The important thing is, the higher the innate soul power, the faster the acquired cultivation speed, and the innate full soul power is the highest level that the martial soul awakening can reach. On this side, Tang San quickly calmed down after learning that he had full innate soul power, and asked in confusion, Uncle, what is full innate soul power? Su Yuntao patiently explained, every 10 levels of soul warriors have a title, Soul Warrior, Great Soul Warrior. The so-called full soul power is the highest value that the soul power can reach after awakening. Innate soul power can only reach level 10, can't go any higher. Of course not. When a soul warrior crosses a 10th level, his soul power will reach its upper limit. Without a soul ring, no matter how much he practices, he cannot improve it. Is that so? What a pity. What a pity. Even if your martial spirit is a farm tool, it is much stronger than the blue-silver grass. Su Yuntao gently patted Tang San's tender shoulders, and when he said this, a look of deep regret emerged on his face. Su Yuntao was scratching his head but couldn't figure out how to cultivate the blue-silver grass martial soul which had innate full soul power. This kind of martial soul had neither attack nor defense, and its growth space was almost zero. I can only say that it is so unlucky to awaken this kind of martial spirit. What a pity. Su Yuntao shook his head repeatedly. Here, Tang San seemed to be thinking about something and returned to his position. His young face was calm and he was not discouraged by the fact that his martial soul was blue-silver grass. Not bad, Xiaosan. As long as you can practice, it's good, not to mention you are at the maximum level. When Li Xian saw him coming, he stepped forward to encourage him. Although he knew the truth, he still pretended to celebrate. Haha, you should do your best too. Tang San smiled. At this moment, the only person in the room who hadn't awakened his martial spirit was Li Xian. Not only Su Yuntao, but the other children also looked over here with blinking eyes. Su Yuntao locked his eyes on her and said, "You are the only one left. Come here." Gently waving his hand, Su Yuntao took one last look at Tang San, then looked towards the back of the team, at the only handsome child left. "I hope you can bring a surprise." When Li Xian was called, he walked over immediately. He walked to the center of the 6 black gems. Su Yuntao stood in front of him and began to mobilize his soul power towards him. Who? Li Xian was surrounded by rotating gems, and under the influence of his soul power, the luster of the gems poured into his body. Li Xian quietly practiced Xian Gong and spread out his palms without waiting for Su Yuntao's signal. I felt a slight burning sensation in the palm of my hand, and something seemed to be about to break out from it. Here it comes. Li Xian was so nervous that he closed his eyes. As the light converged, his body shook violently, and then a green seedling rose up with a pop and floated out from the palm of his hand. Chapter 3. A tender light green grass rapidly grew out from the palm of Li Xian's hand like a lotus leaf. The leaves were spread out on the palm of his hand, and the leaf stems grew upward. New buds continued to grow from the leaf stems, climbing up one section at a time. When the tender leaf stems grow to about half a foot high, the top of the tender buds suddenly split and grow horizontally in 7 or 8 directions, and 3 or 2 light yellow flowers grow at one end of each stem and leaf. The stems and leaves of these flowers grow vigorously and the surface is crystal clear. Seen from a distance, it seemed as if Li Xian's palms were growing out of continuous pieces of brocade, slowly turning and shining. The flowers at the tips of the stems are in bud, like flower buds. The slightly opened petals sway gently, emitting a fresh fragrance all over the body. The flower has about a dozen petals. If you look closely, you can see that the petals are furry, like a bee's butt. There is purple mixed in the petals, the core of the flower is higher than the bud, and the top of the core shines with a faint golden glow. Each flower bud seems to be formed by nature and is a whole. It was the first time that Su Yuntao saw a plant-type soul warrior's martial soul being released so huge. Although the plant type itself is a weapon martial soul, under normal circumstances, the martial soul of a soul warrior would only manifest as a flower or a blade of grass. Li Xian's martial spirit obviously belonged to the latter, but the manifestation of the martial spirit was so complete that Su Yuntao was unable to react for a moment, and a gleam of light flashed in his eyes. Not far away, Tang San's expression changed slightly, and with purple aura in his eyes, he looked at the flower in Li Xian's palm. Seeing the tops of the flowers blooming slightly, those golden and purple buds that looked like chrysanthemums, Tang San looked thoughtful, thinking quickly. This is... Li Xian looked at his own martial soul, and when he saw that his martial soul was a bunch of grass, his heart sank to the bottom. As a child who grew up in the Holy Soul village, his martial soul is indeed a kind of plant. Moreover, judging from the appearance of this plant, it is no different from Tang San's blue-silver grass, and is a useless martial spirit that is very difficult to cultivate. I didn't expect your martial spirit to be the eye-clearing grass. Su Yuntao reacted and said in a light voice that he recalled all the martial arts science that he had read before, and quickly recognized the grass in Li Xian's palm. It looked very much like a weapon martial arts spirit called Mingmu grass. Eye-brightening grass. Li Xian was stunned for a moment, then asked, "Big brother, what is eye-brightening grass?" "It's a kind of grass." Su Yuntao spoke calmly, and then shook his head slightly. The continuous awakening of his martial souls made him feel confused. After sighing, he explained, "The eye-brightening grass is also called cassia seed, also called grass cassia. It is better than blue-silver grass. It can be used as a traditional Chinese medicine." After thinking for a while, Su Yuntao added, "If you can practice and develop into a food-type auxiliary soul master, it's not impossible. Come, test whether you have soul power." As Su Yuntao saw the first somewhat-looking martial spirit today, he was very gentle to give advice and did not go to fight Li Xian. Eye-brightening grass is very common in rural areas, just like blue-silver grass, growing everywhere in the fields. However, as a weapon spirit it is not common. At least Su Yuntao has never seen it in all his time working in Notting City. Precisely because of its rarity, he had said so much to Li Xian. Otherwise, he would not bother to waste words on such a weed martial spirit. My martial soul is medicinal herbs. Li Xian's childish face froze, and something in his heart was surging. He understood what Su Yuntao meant. As a martial soul, the eye-clearing grass had herbal properties, which allowed him to develop into a soul master and be somewhat practical. What Su Yuntao didn't say was that the Mingmu grass was just like Tang San's blue-silver grass spirit, with neither attack nor defense, and absolutely no room for growth. So, it's considered a half-wasted martial spirit. Li Xian was somewhat helpless. He put away his martial spirit and came to the blue crystal. He gently placed his hand on it. In an instant, light burst out and the crystal ball was filled with soul power. The blue liquid inside surged and most of it was filled up. Innate level 6? Not bad. Su Yuntao praised sincerely. Seeing that Li Xian actually had the innate 6th level soul power, he became more and more certain that Li Xian's martial soul was a kind of herb. After all, herbs tend to be food-type martial spirits, and food-type martial spirits rarely have innate high spirit power. Awakening a pseudo-food-type martial spirit of the 6th level of innateness, with upper middle talent. If you listen to my advice and develop towards becoming a food-type spirit master, you will be able to achieve my current achievements in the future. Your name is Li Xian, right? Do you want to come to the spirit hall? While the two were talking, Tang San came over from the side, patted Li Xian on the shoulder, his eyes full of encouragement. Looking back at the encouraging gaze, Li Xian nodded gently, and then responded to Su Yuntao, asking, Big brother, besides joining the Soul Palace, do I have any other choice? Of course, it's your freedom. You can also go to Nottingham Junior College to study, but as far as I know, there is only one place for work-study students in Holy Soul Village this year. You have to think about it. The tuition there is very expensive. In addition, for some martial spirits with potential, the junior colleges of the Tiandu Empire will also open their doors and provide good treatment. The prerequisite is that your martial spirit must be rare. Su Yuntao smiled, but the meaning behind his words was self-evident. Li Xian's martial soul is a bit scarce, but not yet to the point of being precious. As a weapon martial soul, the eye-clearing grass cannot be cultivated, and as a food-type martial soul, it is somewhat ambiguous. On the contrary, the spirit hall will not be stingy in accepting a child with the potential to be a food-type spirit master. I happen to have a place for a work-study student. The Spirit Hall Junior College is also in Nottingham. As for the salary, you only need to know that it is far better than Nottingham Junior College. Su Yuntao extended an olive branch. On the one hand, it was he who awakened Li Xian's martial soul, so this kind of child could be very close to him. On the other hand, it was because his martial soul was rare. If a pseudo-food spirit master could be added to the Spirit Hall, he would surely be rewarded. Moreover, this would be a good choice for Li Xian. Thank you, big brother, but I want to go back and discuss this with the adults first. Li Xian spoke truthfully without giving a clear answer. Of course, I will come again this afternoon. Think carefully about it. The Spirit Hall Junior College does not accept everyone. There were only 2 children with innate spirit power who awakened their spirits today. The one Su Yuntao was referring to was naturally Tang San. Old Jack. After he finished speaking, Su Yuntao shouted, and in response, the village elder Jack, who had been waiting outside the door for a long time, immediately came forward nervously. Master, how is the situation of the martial spirit awakening of the children in our village this year? There are 2 who can practice, and one of them is innately full of soul power. It's a pity that his martial soul is blue silver grass. Otherwise, your village would be really lucky this year. Su Yuntao took out a handkerchief and gently wiped his cheeks and palms, then walked out. Old Jack reacted in the back, with a look of shock on his face. Ah! Innate full soul power. Martial soul blue silver grass. A look of deep disappointment and a hint of unwillingness appeared on his wrinkled face as he chased after Su Yuntao's back. Master, is it really impossible to cultivate blue silver grass? What do you think? As the 2 walked out, the spirit hall was immediately empty. Li Xian and Tang San looked at each other and saw the smile in each other's eyes. Puff. After a while, they both laughed at the same time. You useless martial spirit. And what good are you? Li Xian and Tang San walked out while playing together. In contrast, the other children in the room huddled together, their wrinkled faces filled with disappointment, and they all lowered their heads. Li Xian and Tang San can at least practice, but they are destined to be mediocre for the rest of their lives. On the way back, Li Xian and Tang San showed their martial spirits to the village elder Old Jack. Old Jack sighed and didn't know what to say about the condition of their martial spirits. Tang San was born with full soul power. Logically speaking, his future in cultivation should be limitless. However, what he awakened was the useless spirit blue silver grass, which was a pity. Li Xian is not bad. According to Su Yuntao, he can practice and have his own way out. However, the knowledgeable Old Jack knows that it is harder than climbing to heaven to practice as a food-type soul master. Without combat power, Li Xian's future path will be more or less restricted, and his destination will not be too high. Finally, the village has 2 children who can practice cultivation this year, but both of them have some problems. Sigh. Muttering to himself, Old Jack felt deeply helpless about this. However, he changed his mind and realized that the Holy Soul Village had not produced any soul warriors for many years, and now there were 2. What did he have to be disappointed about? Old Jack regained his spirits and smiled, keeping a gentle appearance in front of the child. Xiao Xian, your situation is better than Xiao San's. I heard from Master Su Yuntao that you can become a food-related soul master in the future. He recommended you to the Junior College of the Spirit Hall. Don't miss such a good opportunity. Li Xian looked at Tang San at this time, with some hesitation on his face. Without waiting for Tang San to speak, Old Jack continued to persuade him, don't think that this is unfair to Xiao San. I know that you 2 have been friends since childhood and have a good relationship. You should know that Xiao San's father is not doing his job properly, and the family is not well off. The cost of soul master training is very high, and this year there is only one place for a work-study student in the village. If you go to the Spirit Hall Junior College with Master Su Yuntao to study, Xiaosan will be able to get this place. This way, there will be no conflict between the two of you, and you can both practice cultivation. What do you think? The village elder Jack looked at Tang San again, and Tang San smiled and nodded. He did not deny that his family was indeed not well off, but Li Xian's parents left him a large sum of money before they left. Even if there were no vacancies for work-study students in the village, he would be able to go to junior college. If so, I also want to be with Xiao San. Li Xian said this suddenly with a half-smile. After all, he grew up playing with Tang San, who is now friendly and pure-hearted. He is reluctant to lose such a friend. In addition, when two people are together, they can take care of each other. Who wouldn't want to be with Destiny's child? The village elder, old Jack, laughed. I know what you are thinking, but Xiaoxian, the Spirit Hall's junior college is in the same building as our Notting City's college. They are both in Notting City. If you go there, you can still meet Xiao San. Besides, the Spirit Hall is very wealthy. Think about it. If you enter through Master Su Yuntao, will you still have trouble practicing there? Food-type spirit masters need a guide to practice, and the Spirit Hall will be very helpful to you in this regard. You should never miss this opportunity. Also, if you start from a higher level, you will have someone to look after your mistress in the future, right? Tang San stretched out his arms to hug Li Xian, his little face showing a smile with white teeth. That's right, Li Xian, don't worry about me, go ahead, although the treatment at the Spirit Hall school is better, but I believe that as long as I practice hard, I won't fall too far behind you. Oh. Hearing such unconvinced words, Li Xian was speechless, but did not refute. Needless to say, your father is a titled Douluo, your mother is a 100,000-year-old spirit beast, and you have two martial spirits with innate full spirit power. Who can compare with you? However, although he understood the gap between them, Li Xian was not completely convinced of defeat. Thinking of the information that just passed by his eyes, he suddenly felt a warm current in his heart and hugged Tang San with his backhand. Then let's have a competition. Haha, okay. There was light in the eyes of both of them, and they looked into the distance confidently. While smiling, Li Xian suppressed the strong heartbeat in his chest and looked into his heart with some disbelief, where a line of information clearly emerged. Martial Soul awakens successfully, Time Fixer activated host, Li Xian Soul Power, innate level 6 revision period, 10 years. Chapter 4. Holy Soul Village was not big, and after sending a few children along the way back, only Li Xian and Tang San were left next to old Jack. Many parents of children in the village were present today, only a few were absent. In the end, there were only two left by his side. One of them had an unemployed family, and the other had been alone since childhood. Old Jack had to send them back personally before he could feel at ease. However, what the village elder Jack didn't know was that Li Xian and Tang San didn't need his care at all. Although they were only 6 years old, the souls in their bodies were mature adults, and together they were not much different from him. That's it, Grandpa Village Chief. I'll go back by myself. Me too. In front of a big tree at the entrance of the village, Li Xian and Tang San waved to the village chief, and ran away before he could react. Hey, these two kids. Old Jack looked at the two people running away in a blink of an eye, sighed helplessly, and then thought of something and shouted at their backs, Xiao San, don't forget what I told you to do. Go back and discuss it with your father. Tang San's voice came immediately, I know, Grandpa. Even so, when old Jack thought of Tang Hao's appearance, his expression immediately changed, no, I still have to go there in person. On the other side, Li Xian and Tang San ran away together, but in fact, Li Xian was being pulled by Tang San. Arriving at an empty corner, Tang San stopped. Li Xian was stunned and looked at Tang San in confusion. What's wrong, Xiaosan? This kind of behavior is not like what the usually steady Tang San would do, Li Xian asked curiously. Don't say that, Li Xian, release your martial spirit and show it to me again. Tang San looked excited and grabbed Li Xian's hand. The little face raised an eyebrow slightly, and Li Xian glanced sideways. He knew Xiao San's character, she would not speak without a purpose. She was so excited, could it be that she saw something? Is there something wrong with my martial spirit? As he spoke, Li Xian released his worthless herbal martial spirit and at the same time, he let out a light sigh. It's fine if it's just herbal medicine, but it's also this kind of eyesight-improving herb that can be found everywhere. Sure enough, they look alike. However, Tang San held Li Xian's wrists tightly with his two small hands, and looked at the glowing martial spirit grass in his palms, but he was staring at the golden-purple flower on the top of the eye-clearing grass, and made a lost voice. Li Xian's heart skipped a beat. Was there something special about his martial spirit? What on earth did he see that could shock Tang San so much? Li Xian asked tentatively, Xiao San, what's wrong? Is there anything special about this martial spirit? Certainly. Tang San was very excited, and even Li Xian was startled by his look. But this excitement lasted only for a moment. Tang San's expression suddenly changed, and he soon fell into contemplation, and changed his tone and said, but, I'm not sure, Li Xian, your martial spirit is very special, it should not be as simple as the eye-brightening grass. Oh. Li Xian looked tentatively at Tang San, waiting for him to speak out himself. Knowing that he was acting strangely, Tang San also discovered something, and he hid his previous gaffe very well, smiling and saying, Li Xian, I once read a book that recorded many precious flowers and plants. There is a kind of chrysanthemum in the book that is similar to your martial spirit, but it is not called eye-brightening grass. What is that? Li Xian asked immediately. Tang San looked at the ground and frowned slightly. I'm just guessing. Although they are very similar, they are not quite the same in some places. I can't be sure. I can only say, Li Xian, don't treat your martial soul as a food-type martial soul. It's not simple. Li Xian was speechless. It's like saying nothing after talking for so long. Xiaosan, you are really weird today. Li Xian was now certain that Tang San must have seen something, but he didn't know what Tang San knew. What's more, Tang San was not sure whether his martial spirit was what he wanted. Although Li Xian was looking forward to it, he did not dare to have too much hope. This is because a powerful martial soul must be accompanied by a higher innate soul power, and Li Xian knew clearly that the reason he possessed a 6th level innate soul power was thanks to the Xian Tiangong. Li Xian's innate soul power was cultivated by himself. Tang San scratched his head. I'm sorry, because it's been a long time, I can't remember clearly. Your martial spirit is a complete plant, and I only remember a flower. That flower is similar to the flower blooming in your martial spirit. It's been a long time. You're only 6 years old, but you talk as if you've lived a long time. Li Xian said with a smile, and then said, so, do you remember the name of that flower, Ming? The strange chrysanthemum. Tang San said calmly, with a deep yearning hidden in his eyes. Here, Li Xian was stunned when he heard a few words. Don't be ridiculous. Is Huali powerful? Li Xian was not unaware that this kind of martial soul seemed to be the martial soul of a certain titled Douluo in the spirit hall. However, according to his vague memory, Zhu Douluo's martial soul was not of this kind either. There was only one. But his martial soul is a complete plant. Tang San continued, I'm not too sure either. Only the flowers are similar. This flower is clearly described as a fairy product in the book. It's definitely not as simple as the eye-brightening grass. Li Xian immediately put his palm forward and placed it in front of Tang San's eyes. Then you must look carefully, Xiao San, I am not well educated, so please don't lie to me. I can't be wrong. As they got closer, Tang San became more and more certain. As a genius disciple of the Tang sect in his previous life, he had the ability to remember everything he saw. Although the plant in Li Xian's hand looked different, the flower that bloomed from it was definitely one of the most masculine and yang immortal products, the Qirong Tong Tianzhu. However, as a fairy product, it would be a blessing from heaven and earth if one of the Qirong Tong Tianzhu could bloom within a vast territory. How could they bloom in clusters? Tang San immediately thought of the mutated martial spirit mentioned by the village chief. Could it be that Li Xian's martial soul is a mutated Qirong Tong Tianzhu, so the immortal products can bloom together? If so, it would be incredible. Tang San continued, the Qirong Tong Tian chrysanthemum is a neutral fairy-grade medicinal herb. Eating it can circulate qi in the limbs and circulate blood in the 8 meridians. It can cultivate an indestructible body. The flower is extremely strong and yang, so its attributes tend to be gold and fire. Li Xian was a little skeptical at the moment. Tang San was so sure that he couldn't tell what was going on. As an immortal martial soul, how could his innate soul power only be level 6? Li Xian couldn't figure it out. Xiao San, no matter what you said is good news for my martial soul. Then tell me, can my martial soul also be trained towards martial arts? It should be possible, but I know too little about martial spirits. I think I can only figure it out when I go to the Soul Master Academy. Tang San said truthfully. Yes, thank you. At this point, Li Xian did not ask any more questions. At this moment, he just hoped that Tang San was not mistaken. If his martial spirit was really the Qirong Tong Tianzhu, it would be quite surprising. You know, the plant martial spirit in the palm of your hand is a complete plant, with at least dozens of flower buds blooming at one end. If all these flower buds are Qirong Tong Tianzhu, how powerful would it be? Before they parted, the two chatted a lot and agreed to meet again at Nottingham. Li Xian and Tang San also separated and went home. Su Yun Tao said he would come back in the afternoon, and when Li Xian got home, he didn't rush to clean up. Instead, he couldn't wait to close the doors and windows, took off his shoes and socks, and sat cross-legged on the bed. Taking a deep breath, Li Xian looked inward and adjusted his mind slightly, and the words time modifier appeared. Golden finger? Why is there no introduction? After studying it for a while, Li Xian was unable to get an answer from this sudden ability. However, he had a strange feeling that any object he touched could be timed. Li Xian grabbed the pillow beside him with both hands and tried to use his abilities. He felt his strength run out and white light emerged from his arms, softly wrapping the entire pillow. In the blink of an eye, the wheat bran pillow began to age, the surface fabric turned dark yellow and cracked, and a musty smell emanated from it. Li Xian was startled and quickly let go of his hand. 10 years, it really feels like I've aged 10 years. Is my ability to add years to things? Li Xian grabbed the pillow again doubtfully and repeated the operation, but this time, nothing happened. The words cannot be changed popped up from the bottom of his mind, as if issuing a warning. Cannot be updated. When the soul power breaks through a new stage, the number of updates will be refreshed. It turned out to be a one-off. Li Xian guessed that this ability could only be refreshed after he broke through to level 10 and became a soul master. However, since it is called a time regulator, the ability of the golden finger must be far more than that. Can my soul power be changed? With doubts, Li Xian closed his eyes, and this time he directly used his ability on the thin soul power in his body. However, the expected results did not occur. Li Xian opened his eyes in disappointment. It seems that his golden finger can only change the objects it touches. His own soul power belongs to cultivation. How can such an abstract concept be changed? 10 years. How great it would be if I could increase my cultivation by 10 years. Oh, right. If I set my goal to be myself, then would the 10 years of cultivation be possible? Li Xian still didn't give up. The soul power in the body is more like a dead object and cannot have the concept of being changed. This kind of power temporarily stored in the body belongs to a kind of spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Even if it increases for 10 years, it is still soul power and nothing will change. On the contrary, if he devoted himself to cultivation and allowed this behavior to last for 10 years, what would be the result? His heart was burning with anxiety. Li Xian took a deep breath, immediately suppressed his excitement, and planned to verify this idea. Then, his mind was clear, and he started practicing the Xiantian technique on this small bed. Immediately, spiritual energy was mobilized and flowed into this small body along the top of his head. After a while, Li Xian fell into a semi-meditation state, so he devoted a bit of his mind to set the maximum time for the ongoing cultivation state. Change the time, 10 years. As the milky white halo flowed out from his body, Li Xian's whole body felt numb and itchy, and he immediately felt as if his flesh was growing and spiritual energy was infusing him. In his mind, time passed, the sun and the moon alternated, and Li Xian fell into meditation, constantly practicing Xiantian Gong, and his body was also slowly growing. Until a certain moment, his soul power was full and he could no longer practice. Li Xian withdrew from the practice and his mind slowly awakened. As his eyes opened, a hint of vicissitudes flashed in his gaze. It seemed as if a year had passed. Ignoring the emptiness in his body, Li Xian immediately checked his body. His heart skipped a beat and he discovered that his soul power was full and had reached level 10. Chapter 5. Li Xian was in a very good mood and forgot for a moment that he was still in bed. He suddenly clenched his fists and stood up, punching in the air, feeling the power brought by the strong soul force in his body. At this moment, there was a sound of ripping, and Li Xian looked at his shirt with wrinkles on his face. The thread under the armpit of his coarse cloth shirt had burst open, leaving a small hole. Not only that, Li Xian looked down at his trouser legs and found that the trousers, which had originally fit perfectly, were now too short. Li Xian blinked, and after just a moment, he understood the reason, and a sudden fear rose in his heart. When he was adjusting the years of his cultivation, this body was also adjusting with time. In other words, for every year of cultivation in his mind world, this body also grew by 1 year. If soul warriors did not fall into shackles every 10 levels and needed soul rings to advance, I am afraid that 10 years would really pass in his mind world. I've grown a lot taller. How can I explain this to everyone? Also, I must not be so reckless in the future. Li Xian shivered inwardly, muttering something for no reason. He found himself getting a little anxious. Now that he has the golden finger, he can verify it slowly in the future. Although he has upgraded his cultivation to level 10 this time, his renewal period will also increase as his cultivation breaks through in the future. You know, the soul cultivator's cultivation is not always smooth sailing. If they get stuck, they will really spend 10 or 100 years in their mind. After they settle down, they will become old men. Use with caution, use with caution. After becoming alert, Li Xian quickly took off his torn clothes and found his father's old clothes in the closet and put them on temporarily. Generally speaking, the improvement of soul power is a good thing. Changing one's cultivation level can only be used as a backup. When other soul masters are unable to improve their cultivation, he still has the possibility of a last-ditch effort, but it cannot be used indiscriminately. My father's clothes fit him well. In this small holy soul village, there were not many decorations on clothes. The simple white linen clothes were soft and comfortable on his body, and it was very convenient for him to move around. Next, Li Xian heated up the food and had a simple lunch. He then practiced for a while. The increased soul power in his body gradually stabilized. After that, he began to pack up all the items, big and small. Because Li Xian's cultivation was achieved step by step, he did not have the problem of soul power being exhausted. After all, he really spent a year in the world of his mind. Soon, the room was emptied and the things that could not be taken away were put into the closet. Looking at the empty room, Li Xian felt inexplicably lonely. I never expected that I would have to leave Holy Soul Village and leave this home where I had lived for 2 years. Before awakening his martial soul, he hadn't thought too much about the life of a soul warrior. He prepared for the worst and even accepted that he would be an ordinary person who couldn't practice, make friends like Tang San, and slowly spend the rest of his life. And now, with the ability to cultivate strength and activate the golden finger, Li Xian couldn't help but open his eyes. He believed that he had a place in the soul master world on the Pan continent. Climb to the top. Naturally, it became his only goal now. In the afternoon, a horse-drawn carriage rolled over the bluestone road and swayed to the entrance of the village. Then, the village elder, Old Jack, came hurriedly and knocked on the door of the Li family. Li Xian had been waiting for a long time. After taking his luggage, he followed the village chief out. Old Jack walked quickly in front with his hunchbacked figure. Fearing to neglect a soul master like Su Yuntao, he kept urging Li Xian and did not notice the changes in Li Xian, which made Li Xian feel relieved. When he arrived in Notting City and joined the Junior Soul Master Academy, the first thing he had to do was to find a teacher to help him obtain soul rings. As long as he got the soul rings, things like becoming stronger and taller would be easy to explain. At the entrance of the village, the coachman saw the two men approaching, jumped off the carriage, bent down and helped Li Xian put the luggage on the carriage. Su Yuntao had been waiting in the carriage for a long time. To Li Xian's surprise, there was a girl sitting in the carriage. The girl was about the same age as him, with delicate and tender features. What attracted people the most attention was her big black eyes, which were clear and transparent, like autumn water reflecting the sky. The girl was wearing a black formal dress with slightly heavy creases on it. She had clear eyes and sat upright. When she saw the carriage opening, she couldn't help but look at Li Xian. "Oh, you're here, Li Xian." The carriage door opened, Su Yuntao stood up and pulled Li Xian into the carriage. He needed to bend down to stand up with his huge body. This carriage was not too high, so Li Xian could climb on it easily. However, this action shortened the distance between him and Li Xian. He did not discriminate against Li Xian because of his village origin, but instead showed him respect, which invisibly increased Li Xian's favor towards him. "Have you packed your things? Have you said goodbye to your family?" Li Xian nodded, and then sat obediently next to him. Opposite him was the girl in black, so he was too embarrassed to sit over there. Su Yuntao said this with a smile, and at the same time looked outside the carriage. He found that the only person coming was old Jack, and his expression changed slightly. He didn't ask any more questions, sat down again and greeted old Jack. "Thank you for your hard work, village chief. I will take the child with me. When he arrives at the academy, I will urge him to practice. Li Xian will not be able to come back this year. If there is anything urgent, just come to the Wuhan Hall in Notting City to find me." "Thank you very much, Master Su Yuntao. Xiao Xian, go there and practice seriously, don't slack off. Grandpa is waiting for you to come back to see me during the new year." The village elder Jack lowered his waving hand and his eyes became moist. When Li Xian was very young, he lived in his home for a period of time. It can be said that the village chief treats Li Xian as his own child. "Of course, Grandpa village chief." Li Xian felt a sudden pang of sadness in his heart. He had spent 6 years here and the people around him were very friendly to him. It would be a lie to say that he didn't feel anything. "Li Xian!" At this moment, a clear shout was heard from a distance, and Tang San's small figure ran over. Li Xian's face changed. He had not had time to inform Tang San and had said goodbye in the morning. He thought about going to Notting City first and meeting Xiao San there. "Here, this is for you." Tang San panted heavily, handed a wrapped thing that looked like a book to Li Xian, and then said, "Don't forget our agreement." Li Xian was stunned for a moment, then he understood immediately. "Okay, seeing that you've been pestering me for so long, I'll agree to your request. Goodbye." After waving his hand, the carriage slowly drove away, and the silhouette of the village and the village chief gradually shrank in Li Xian's eyes. After passing a few intersections, all that was left outside the window was the scenery. After calming down, Li Xian sat quietly, waiting for the boring journey of the carriage to Nottingham. Because of his bad mood just now, he had not had time to check what Tang San gave him, but Li Xian already understood that the package in his hand was most likely Tang San's handwritten Xiantian Bailu, which recorded the use of hidden weapons and the subsequent training methods of the Tang Sect's 6 external skills. Logically speaking, Tang San should have handed these over to Li Xian a long time ago, but when he asked Li Xian to join the Tang Sect, Li Xian ignored him, so it was delayed until today. Now that Tang San took the initiative to hand over the treasure record to him, Li Xian softened his heart and agreed. "Tang Sect, right? I never thought that I would join Tang Sect." The Xiantian Bailu also records the pharmacopoeia, sect rules and the making of various hidden weapons. Li Xian knew that Tang San gave this thing to him, and this friendship was very deep. Just Tang San's abnormal use of hidden weapons, if he were to practice it himself, he would have mastered a powerful force, not to mention the herbs and poison-making technology. Suddenly, a bright gaze came over, and Li Xian's heart moved. He put aside his thoughts and looked back at that gaze, but saw that the girl in black in front of him was avoiding his gaze. The air fell into a brief silence. Along the way, Su Yuntao was talking to the girl, but Li Xian was absent-minded and didn't listen carefully to what they were saying. Just now, Su Yuntao picked up the teacup to moisten his throat, and the girl opposite took the opportunity to secretly glance at Li Xian. Paying attention to the movements of the two people, Su Yuntao chuckled. "Oh, by the way, I haven't introduced you to each other yet. Yuexi, the boy sitting next to me is called Li Xian, and his martial spirit was also awakened by me. Li Xian's martial spirit is different from your agility attack martial spirit. His martial spirit is Kasha, and he will most likely become an auxiliary spirit master in the future. Your two villages are close to each other. When you arrive at the academy, remember to take care of each other. Say hello quickly." "Hello." The girl in black raised her head and looked over with her snow-white eyes. Her pair of clear big eyes left a deep impression on Li Xian. Perhaps realizing that this was not friendly enough, the girl named Yuexi stretched out her hand stiffly with a timid smile on her face. "My name is Li Xian." As for Li Xian, he had a mature soul in his body after all. In his eyes, Yuexi was just a little kid wearing open crotch pants. He casually reached out his hand and gently shook hands with Yuexi. However, the moment the two palms touched, a wave like an electric current spread from the palms, and then a cold feeling spread along the arms to the whole body. Li Xian's eyes widened and he took a deep breath. "This is..." On the opposite side, the girl Yuexi also noticed something. She sat up straight and her eyes widened even more. "What's wrong?" Su Yuntao was slightly stunned, looked at the two people in a stalemate, and asked puzzledly. "Shake hands and don't want to let go?" It's okay." Li Xian was the first to loosen his palm, gently rubbed his fingertips, and slowly retracted it. Uxi on the opposite side dodged hurriedly, avoiding his gaze. Su Yuntao said calmly, I forgot to mention that Uxi awakened a mutant martial soul, which is a shadow. I have never encountered such a situation before. Her innate soul power has reached level 6, the same as yours. Uxi, I have already reported your situation. As I just said, every special spirit must go through the process and be recorded in the Spirit Hall archives. When we arrive in Notting City, Master Michano will be in charge of these. I still need your cooperation. Good. The girl Uxi responded timidly, and while speaking, she secretly glanced at Li Xian. Having grown up in the village, this was her first time traveling far away from home. Moreover, she was only 6 years old and seemed very reserved when she spoke. Even though she was curious about Li Xian, she only dared to look at him secretly. It was not until this time that Li Xian began to pay serious attention to Uxi. She was wearing a slightly large black dress, and her long black hair was braided and combed on both sides in front of her body. Her eyes were black and bright, like two big grapes. Perhaps because she played in the village all year round, her skin was a healthy wheat color, and her slightly exposed white neck showed that she originally had a very fair complexion. However, if he were to rate her appearance, Li Xian would give it a maximum of 6 points. Perhaps her appearance has not yet fully grown, and her eyebrows and eyes are a little delicate, but she is not a naturally beautiful woman. That feeling just now, what happened? Li Xian leaned against the carriage window, recalling the sudden agitation of soul power in his body when he just touched Uxi. Soon, he guessed a possibility. It is said, the host's soul power of martial souls with the same and repulsive attributes can be integrated with each other. If this soul power is used to activate skills, it has a special name, Martial Soul Fusion Skill. As for Uxi, her martial soul is Shadow, which is dark. Xiao San said that she has the Qirong Tongtianju in her martial soul, which is extremely hard and yang, and is mutually exclusive with the dark attribute. Could it be that this girl and I have the potential to fuse our spirits? Chapter 6. Half a day later, the carriage passed through the mountain road and arrived in Nottingham. The streets were bustling with people. This town was located at the border of the Tiandu and Xingluo empires. It was a small town with all kinds of shops and many soul masters coming and going. Li Xian dozed off for a while, and when he woke up, the carriage had just entered the city gate. Uxi was leaning against the window with her two little hands stretched out, watching the crowd moving backwards. It was getting dark, and the dim lights illuminated the blurry streets in the distance. A gust of wind blew, which inexplicably lifted Li Xian's spirits. Are we there yet? Su Yuntao stopped dozing off, opened his eyes, stretched out a finger to poke a glimpse out of the small window, with a slight relief on his face. After this half-day journey, even he, a soul master, felt a little tired. He had been awakening the martial souls of the children in the village for the entire day and had hardly had any rest. Let's go to the spirit hall first. Su Yuntao said to the coachman across the carriage. Okay, master. The driver pulled the reins and the carriage drove along the street towards the center of Nottingham. Li Xian guessed that they would go to the spirit hall to register and then go to the Notting City Junior Spirit Academy. You must be hungry. After taking a nap, Su Yuntao felt much better. He snapped his hands forward and asked the two people in front of him with a smile. Uxi nodded, then immediately shook her head, and finally looked at Li Xian. Li Xian didn't lie, I'm hungry. Since Su Yuntao brought them to Notting City, it is probably his responsibility to take care of them. Besides, eating is nothing to a soul master, and Li Xian did not lie. The carriage stopped in front of a roadside stall. Su Yuntao took out a few copper soul coins and bought a few cold cakes. Standing in front of the vendor's cart, Su Yuntao's eyes were wandering. Then, he walked to a candied horse shop which was still open and packed a few candied horse. The wheels of the carriage turned slowly and continued to move forward. Inside the carriage, Li Xian and Uxi were holding cold cakes in their hands. This kind of food was similar to a multi-grain pancake, with a cool, smooth and tender crust, and filled with cucumbers, peanut crisps, bean curd sheets and various small ingredients. The portions Su Yuntao bought were large, and they were definitely enough to fill the children. Brother Su Yuntao, you are such a nice person. Li Xian muttered something while eating. Su Yuntao just smiled and said, we have to get to the academy before dark. You guys can eat something first. I'll treat you to a good meal when we get to the academy. Across from her, Uxi opened her little mouth, held a small piece of bread in her mouth, chewed it gently, and the cucumber in the bread fell out, causing the girl to reach out to catch it in a hurry. Li Xian looked over and smiled, look at me. Li Xian lay on his back with his mouth wide open. He stuffed one end of the cold cake into his mouth and took a bite. His whole mouth was stretched out. Li Xian took a long time to take the first bite. He slapped his chest so hard that he almost couldn't catch his breath. Puff. On the opposite side, Uxi couldn't help laughing and covered her mouth with her hands. However, she was bolder in the way she ate and her little mouth was soon greasy. Not so reserved anymore. Compared with the other two, Su Yuntao's way of eating was much more dignified. He chewed the food without making any sound. A pair of bright eyes looked out of the window, with the candied horse in his arms and a happy face. Li Xian didn't quite understand why Su Yuntao bought this kind of food. It is enough to fill your stomach, but it is difficult to maintain proper posture while eating this kind of food. Just like him. Wiping the oil off the corners of his mouth, Li Xian let out a breath from his stomach, which accidentally went down his throat and came out of his mouth. Burp, burp, burp. You kid. Su Yuntao interrupted his meditation, and his good mood was ruined. He stretched out his big hand and covered Li Xian's head. How can a burp be divided into 3 parts? Yuexi burst into laughter and tried to hold it back, so she puffed and 2 streams of snot flew out like flying butterflies. Yuexi was in a panic. Li Xian immediately handed her a tissue. Su Yuntao had a dark face and shook his head speechlessly. Jumping child. It just took a while for the well-behaved Yuexi to become stupid. In the sky, golden light shines in all directions, dyeing the clouds red. The horse neighed and finally stopped in front of a tall building. After several people got off the car, Su Yuntao paid the fare and then asked the groom to send the luggage to the Junior Martial Soul Academy. Then, Su Yuntao took Li Xian and Yu into the spirit hall. Li Xian craned his neck and looked up at the huge spirit hall. The grey-blue building had 3 floors, a round roof and square pillars. There was a sword mark engraved above the door plaque, and the steps in front of the door were carved from white jade. Since Li Xian came to this world, he had never seen such a grand building. Master Su, thank you for your hard work. A female soul master came towards them, and when she saw Su Yuntao, she bowed respectfully. Su Yuntao nodded. Where is Master Machino? The master is in the office. Su Yuntao said he understood and was about to take the 2 people to the office. At this time, his eyes lit up and he saw a woman with a good figure and delicate features walking out of an office on the 1st floor. Sissy. When Su Yuntao saw the woman, he immediately walked over. Take these 2 children to see Master Machino. The master will know the details. Hey Euro hey. The woman in front of him wanted to say something. Li Xian and Uxi were suddenly left in the hall, both of them were a little confused. Brother Su Yuntao, what's going on? However, when Li Xian saw Su Yuntao walking up to a woman, talking and laughing, and taking out cold noodles and candied haws from his arms, he suddenly understood. Love is like a violent storm. Li Xian shook his head and said, Big sister, tell me the location and we can go there by ourselves. May I? The woman in front of him obviously had something urgent to do. She told Li Xian the location of Master Machino's office, then ran away with her hands clasped together. Yuexi was very nervous and quietly approached Li Xian and stood beside him. Shall we go find Master Ma ourselves? Well, it's not a big problem. Li Xian said casually. This is the spirit hall, which plays a very important role in the entire Nodding City. People coming and going are either spirit masters or nobles. It is very safe here. Following what the woman said, Li Xian went to the 2nd floor and found Master Machino's office. Knock, knock. Li Xian knocked on the door gently and waited in front of the door with Yuexi. After a few seconds, an old voice came from inside, come in. Letting him hold her little hand, Li Xian took Yuexi inside. Calming incense is burning in the office, and cool air is blown out through the crystal stones in the ceiling. Master Ma knows how to enjoy himself, and the office atmosphere is tranquil and comfortable. Li Xian took Uxi to stand in front of Ma Xiaonuo's office desk and said respectfully, Hello, Master Ma Xiaonuo, Brother Su Yuntao asked us to come and see you. Ma Xiaonuo stood up after hearing this, looked at the 2 people in front of him, and said with a smile, Hey, did you come here by yourselves? Haha, I heard about your story, thank you for your hard work on the way. It's not hard. Brother Su Yuntao is busy with other things. Li Xian said. So that's how it is. Ma Xiaonuo had a kind face, looking at the 2 little guys in front of him, his eyes revealed joy, yes, you 2 little guys have strong soul power and high talent for cultivation. You are very welcome to join the spirit hall. Li Xian frowned slightly at this moment, Master, entering the spirit academy is equivalent to joining the spirit hall, right? Of course. Machino said with a smile, also, you don't have to call me master. If you don't mind, you can just call me Grandpa Machino. I'm old, so it should be fine for me to be your grandfather. Grandpa Mathono. Yuexi called out obediently. Hey, good boy. When Machino heard this, all the wrinkles on his face were squeezed together. Come on, I'll take you to the appraisal. It's late today, so I'll arrange for you to go to the academy tomorrow. As he spoke, Machino led the way, taking Li Xian and Yuexi out of the office and walking to one side along the corridor. At this time, Li Xian was a little confused. He didn't expect that entering the Spirit Academy was equivalent to joining the Spirit Hall. The sudden situation made him at a loss. However, now that he was here, he couldn't speak. He couldn't just say, I remember that bad things will happen to the Spirit Hall in the future, and I don't want to join you. Li Xian couldn't guarantee things that hadn't happened. Besides, if he really joined the Spirit Hall and became strong enough, he could also prevent those problems from happening. Thinking of this, Li Xian felt relieved. On the corridor on the 2nd floor, Ma Xiaonuo led the way and said as he walked, Su Yuntao has already told me about your situation. Li Xian, Martial Soul Kasha Grass, Innate Soul Power Level 6. Uxi, Martial Soul Shadow, Innate Soul Power Level 6. You 2 kids, your martial spirits are really rare. I have never even heard of them. When you get to the academy, I will arrange for teachers with rich experience in this field to guide you. By the way, I will test your soul power again later to ensure that there will be no problems with admission. Uxi nodded, and Li Xian's eyes lit up. He hadn't told Su Yuntao that his soul power had reached level 10. Now Li Xian urgently needed to obtain a soul ring. I was just worrying about how to start the conversation, and now the opportunity has come. I'll just think of a reason to deal with Matthew Nyo later. After all, he can't wait until his soul power reaches the maximum level, so it's better for him to obtain the soul ring as soon as possible. At the end of the corridor is the room for testing soul power. 3 gates stood, each with a token engraved on it. A sword pointed vertically downward, the blade gleaming with cold light, and the hilt was entirely silver without a trace of impurities. The symbol of the sword. Li Xian immediately thought of a titled Douluo who used a sword, Jian Dao Chen Xin. If I remember correctly, the spirit hall is divided into 6 levels, and each level of the spirit hall corresponds to a symbol or a combination of symbols. Those symbols come from the martial spirits held by the famous titled Douluo in the world today. They are sword, ghost, chrysanthemum, dragon, tower, and hammer. The Wuhan Hall in Notting City should be the lowest level Wuhan branch hall, with only 1 token logo, while the Wuhan sub hall above has 2 logos. Ma Xianyu led the 2 into the room on the far left, pushed open the door, and an ancient atmosphere rushed straight into Li Xian's face. The room was tall and wide, with walls inlaid with black crystals. Standing in the room, the Xiantian gong in his body was drawn in, and the soul power in his meridians became much more active. Ma Xianyu walked to the center of the marked room, turned sideways and said, Yuexi, come here, walk to the center area and use your martial spirit. Yuexi walked over and seemed a little nervous, but Ma Xianyu was not in a hurry and stood aside waiting patiently. Concentrate and calm your mind. Matthew said softly. Gently raising her palm, Yuexi took a deep breath, and then, according to her memory, she activated the soul power in her body with some awkwardness. Suddenly, in the central area of A the soul palace room, the crystal floor shone brightly, and the holy light enveloped Yuexi. Covered by the light and pulled by the soul power, a layer of black halo also flowed out from Yuexi's body. The palm that was suspended in midair was submerged by the black light in her body. Yuexi continued to mobilize her soul power. In the palm of her hand, it seemed like black quicksand slowly gathered. Gradually, a black shadow resembling Yuexi took shape. The black shadow was very similar to Yuexi, with long hair gently tossing and neck gracefully stretched. The face without facial features was looking at everyone at this moment, as if it had come alive in the palm of the hand. Phantom. Master Mishano lost his voice. Chapter 7. Yuexi tapped her toes lightly, and a holy light rippled beneath her body. In that pure and flawless light, the black quicksand substance in her body was also flowing, especially her right hand. Almost the entire arm was wrapped in black. In the palm of her hand, the black veil figure stood, with her 2 arms hanging lightly on both sides. Li Xian's face was illuminated by the light. He stared at the martial soul in Yuexi's hand. His pupils shrank slightly, as if his soul was sucked into it. Don't look. Close your eyes. At the critical moment, Master Mashino stood in front of Li Xian. The old man activated his soul power to stop the soul power in Yuexi's body and pulled her out of the central area. As the martial spirit entered her body, Yuexi's strength was exhausted. Her bright eyes dimmed and her delicate body stumbled forward a few steps. What's wrong, Master Mishino? Li Xian came back to his senses and shook his eyes. Just a moment ago, he seemed to have suddenly lost all memory and only remembered staring at Yuexi's martial soul at the last moment. Master Mashino had a gloomy expression and his eyes were like blades as he looked down at Yuexi beside him. A ball of soul power gathered in his right hand, almost squeezing Yuexi's arm purple. Hiss, it hurts. Yuexi wanted to break free, but how could her strength compare to that of a great soul master who had practiced for a lifetime? She struggled for a moment, fear appearing on her face. Grandpa Ma, what are you doing? Why are you suddenly angry? Li Xian immediately ran over and separated the palms and arms of the 2 men. Although he was only 6 years old, his body was well developed. Standing in front of the hunchbacked Matthew Nyo, he was only half a head shorter. Having said that, if Matthew Nyo didn't want to let go, Li Xian would have no chance. At this moment, the old man withdrew his hand, his white brows were tightly furrowed, and his eyes were full of complexity. The spirit hall cannot accept you. Go back, Yuexi. It is best not to practice in this life. After saying this, Mashino turned his back. Yuexi's face was pale at the moment. She had no idea what was going on. She stood there, her petite body shaking uncontrollably. Li Xian's eyes flickered. The moment Yuexi used her martial soul seemed to come alive. By the way, Phantom, what does Master Ma mean by this sentence? Grandpa Ma, you just mentioned the Phantom. What is the Phantom? And, you suddenly said that Yuexi can't practice. Why is that? Li Xian asked to Mashino's back. After a long silence, Mashino turned his gaze and sighed, it's not impossible to tell you, Yuexi, don't blame Grandpa, I was also frightened by your martial spirit just now. You should know that in this world, martial souls are divided into useless martial souls, ordinary martial souls, and top martial souls. However, ordinary martial souls will mutate during the genetic process. This type of martial soul often has very extreme abilities, and a small part of them are very dangerous. If that's the case, then the more powerful mutated martial spirits can also be called top-level martial spirits, right? Li Xian couldn't help but ask. Theoretically, yes, but basically impossible. Mashino denied it, saying, first, mutant martial spirits are difficult to cultivate. During the awakening process, many children do not have companion spirit power. Secondly, mutant martial spirits are not very stable and are difficult to pass on to children. This type of martial spirit often only appears in the first generation, while top-level martial spirits can be inherited in the family. According to what you said, Yuexi and I both have mutated spirits, and cannot be passed down to our children. Li Xian remembered that just now in the corridor, Mashino had said that his martial soul was a mutated martial soul, which was rarely seen. And what do you mean by dangerous? How can a martial soul be dangerous? Ma Xiaoyunyo was silent for a moment, then sighed, not quite the same. Li Xian, although your spirit is rare, according to the Spirit Hall's information, it has appeared several times in the Spirit Master world. The extremely mutated martial souls I'm talking about are those whose martial souls are dangerous, or whose cultivation conditions are mutated, and those who rely on devouring soul power, soul rings, flesh and blood, and souls to cultivate, and are abnormal in their approach. Yuexi's martial soul is the first type, which the Spirit Hall calls the evil martial soul. After hearing this, Li Xian understood that martial soul mutation was not a good thing, and most of it would develop in a bad direction. It can also be said that his martial soul is just a genetic mutation, while Yuexi's martial soul is completely a mutation of the martial soul itself. These situations are not equal. Li Xian thought for a moment and then asked, Grandpa Ma, please tell us why Yuexi's evil martial spirit cannot practice. Where is the danger? Yuexi lowered her little head, she didn't know that her martial soul was evil. She was the only one in the village who awakened a martial soul that could be cultivated this year. Her parents were very happy and everyone in the village thought it was a good thing. But now, the master of the Spirit Hall said that her spirit was an evil spirit. Yuexi found it difficult to understand. She lowered her head and her eyes suddenly became red and swollen. Ma Xiaoyunyo sighed deeply. According to the information currently known in the Spirit Hall, evil spirits are roughly divided into corpse control, spirit control, beast control, exorcism, evil summoning, blood transformation, etc. It is easy to go wrong when practicing evil spirits, and the spirits themselves are also dangerous. Yuexi's spirit belongs to the evil summoning type. You and I have just seen that Yuexi's spirit body has basic consciousness, and she can even charm the soul of a spirit master. Child, Grandpa doesn't want to hurt you. You won't be able to control this kind of power in the future. Yuexi nodded, rubbed her eyes with her little hands, and tears couldn't stop flowing. When Li Xian saw this scene, he felt a little uncomfortable. Yuexi and he are the few children who can practice near the Holy Soul village. Yuexi awakened her martial soul and soul power and came to Nodding City to practice. Her family must be very pleased. But now, she is told that she can't practice. She must be very sad. Li Xian took out a tissue, walked to Yuexi's side, patted her gently to comfort her. Grandpa Ma, is there really no other way? Ma Xiaoyunyo's expression was complicated. If there is an external object controlling this power, the evil martial spirit can naturally be cultivated, but what I am worried about is that Yuexi is still young and it is easy for her to be assimilated by the phantom. It will be difficult for her to maintain her original heart during the cultivation process. Then wouldn't it be enough to find an external object that can be controlled and stay by Yuexi's side? Li Xian asked tentatively. It's not that easy to find. Hearing this, Ma Xiaoyunyo's face flashed with helplessness. He slowly said, to suppress the evil power in the martial soul, it must be a more evil substance, or a soul master with powerful cultivation. Even if I want to help Yuexi, it is difficult to do it with my own strength. In order to suppress the cultivation of the evil martial soul, one must be a powerful soul master at least above the soul saint level. However, how could such a big shot appear in such a small city like Nottingham? There are naturally many soul saints in the Spirit Hall, but the Spirit Hall has always rejected evil spirits and evil soul masters. Matthew Nyo said this because he couldn't bear it. If it were someone else, they might have already driven Yuexi out of the Spirit Hall. Li Xian's eyes flickered, and he thought of something, but he still didn't give up. Grandpa Ma, according to what you said, since there are evil spirits, there must be righteous spirits. If we find such a spirit to accompany Yuexi in her training, then we can solve the problem of her spirit being in danger. Machinyo was slightly puzzled. Do you mean, the top martial spirit with light attribute? That's probably what it means. Li Xian couldn't tell which martial soul was called light attribute, and he didn't know which top martial souls were. He said this only because his own martial soul, Qirong Tongtianju, possessed positive power, which might be able to suppress Yuexi's phantom martial soul. Ma Xiaoyunyo's expression of helplessness became even more intense. Li Xian, I understand that you want to help Yuexi stay in Spirit Hall, but your idea is too naive. Once a soul master with that kind of martial soul is discovered, he will be accepted as a disciple by the nobles or the royal family. It has to have light attributes and it has to be a top-level martial spirit, which is not easy to find. Moreover, maybe I just said it too lightly, and you didn't understand what I meant. Yuexi's phantom spirit is one of the top evil spirits. Even most of the top spirits can't suppress this evil power. Mashino's tone suddenly became higher and his attitude became resolute. He only said this now because he was soft-hearted. It was certain to him that Yuexi could not practice. Although doing so would be unfair to the child, there was nothing he could do because this was the rule of martial arts. He even wanted to seal Yuexi's martial spirit to prevent her from practicing secretly and bringing danger to the world of soul masters. Thinking of this, Matthew took a deep breath, his kind expression turned into sternness, and he strode towards Yuexi. Master, wait, my martial spirit has not been tested yet. Maybe Yuexi still has a chance. Is it really okay for you to do this? Seeing this, Li Xian immediately stood in front of Yuexi. After his soul power reacted with Yuexi, Li Xian paid great attention to this girl. Besides, Yuexi and he were both children from the village. No matter which reason, he couldn't bear to see Yuexi being sent back. Li Xian, get out of the way. Grandpa is not in the mood to play with you. Machino exuded a stern and cold temperament, and did not stop because of Li Xian's obstruction. Li Xian knew that if Machino had a thought, he would be driven away, and he would definitely not be able to stop it. Thinking of this, Li Xian could only walk away. However, Li Xian immediately walked towards the central area of A the Soul Palace. If his martial soul was activated, it might be able to play a role. Here, Matthew looked down at Yuexi from above, hesitated for a moment, and took a deep breath. If he was not ruthless, he would be harming Yuexi. Once her phantom martial soul grew up, even Yuexi herself would not be able to control it. Go home and be a normal kid. Machino activated his soul power and slowly placed his hand on Yuexi's head. Yuexi sobbed softly. In this situation, she had no chance of resisting. She was like a lamb to be slaughtered, allowing Machino to seal her martial spirit. Thinking of this, she burst into tears and snot flowing uncontrollably. Wait, Master Ma. At the critical moment, Li Xian called out to Machino, and without any hesitation, he walked to the central area and immediately released his martial spirit. As the holy light enveloped Li Xian, a mannequin hot power suddenly erupted in the room. The walls, ceiling, and floor tiles all released dazzling light, which for a moment covered Matthew's eyes. In the very center, Li Xian was standing upright in a white linen robe. In the palm of his raised hand, a half-foot-tall emerald green plant grew out. The tender leaves were small and round, and the leaf stems climbed up step by step. At the top of the leaves, 30 or 40 golden and purple buds swayed gently, shaking in the holy light, and the light produced was several times more than before. This is... Machino, who was about to seal Yuexi's martial soul, was stunned when he saw this scene. Top martial spirit. Chapter 8. The light brought about a gust of wind, blowing Li Xian's hair upwards. Unexpectedly, his martial soul could draw out such a powerful force. All the spirit stones in the room released a strong light at the same time. Li Xian didn't know that in this martial soul testing hall, all the bricks and stones were engraved with soul stones for testing the quality of martial souls. When he was recording his martial souls, the soul stones in the soul hall were also scanning him. Once a top-level martial soul appears, the soul stone will be activated, and the higher the quality of the martial soul, the stronger the light released by the soul stone in the hall will be. Machino was so shocked by the scene before him that he withdrew his hand from Yuexi's head. The old man muttered in disbelief, top-level martial spirits, this is definitely a characteristic of top-level martial spirits. Li Xian, what martial spirit did you awaken? Isn't it Kashitora? This is what Brother Su Yuntao said. Li Xian was also confused at this moment. If he had known that the reaction would be so strong, he should have restrained himself. The reaction just now should be that some device in the room detected his martial soul, and just like Xiao San said, the bud blooming in his martial soul is really the fairy herb Qirong Tong Tianju. Li Xian would never doubt this again. Su Yuntao, Su Yuntao. How many times will this kid be blind? Master Machano's mood at the moment was extremely complicated. He was excited and angry. He couldn't tell which one he should take more seriously. Speaking of Su Yuntao, Matthew Nyo's accumulated emotions suddenly found an outlet. Okay, the evil spirit was treated as a mutated shadow spirit by him, and the top spirit that Li Xian awakened was treated as a food-type kasha grass by him. You Su Yuntao. What can I say about you? At the same time, on a busy street in Nottingham, Su Yuntao, who was enjoying the sweetness of his partner, suddenly sneezed and frowned, wondering if he had a cold. Here, Matthew put Yuexi's matter aside for the time being, and walked quickly to Li Xian's side, his eyes burning as if he had discovered a treasure. He stared at the half-foot-tall plant in Li Xian's palm, his eyes slightly opened, attracted by the blooming flowers in it, and was stunned for a moment. A top-level martial spirit, definitely a top-level martial spirit. Such a masculine aura, like some kind of precious elixir in the legend. I seem to have seen this flower somewhere before, but I can't remember it for the moment. Li Xian really wanted Machino to take a closer look. If the Qirong Tong Tianju had a close relative, he would know the real name of his martial soul. However, as the soul stones in the entire hall flickered, Li Xian found that the soul power in his body was rapidly lost, and the already thin soul power could hardly maintain the release of the martial soul. Grandpa Ma, I can't hold on any longer. Li Xian clenched his palms, and the martial soul disappeared before his eyes. All the strange phenomena extinguished. Machino was looking at the martial soul obsessively, and he was stunned when he saw this, with a trace of unsatisfied feeling on his face. That is a top-level martial spirit, and one that has never appeared before. Machino is sure that this martial spirit is higher than the average top-level martial spirit. And judging from the aura of light released by the martial spirit bloodline is stable. If it is continued, a new clan will surely rise in the Tiandu Empire in the future. Su Yuntao was wrong. Li Xian, your martial spirit is definitely not as simple as kasha herb. As far as I know, it should be some kind of magical medicine. Wait for me to go back and investigate. Don't worry, you will know its name soon. Li Xian already knew half of the name. He was more concerned about Yuexi at the moment. Grandpa Ma, do you think my martial spirit can help Yuexi's training? If I stay with Yuexi all the time, can he stay in the spirit hall? Faced with this question, Matthew was stunned for a moment, lowered his brows and thought carefully. Judging from the aura released by the martial soul just now, the plant was extremely strong and masculine, and there was absolutely no problem in suppressing Yuexi's martial soul. But the problem is, it would be better if he didn't know. Now that he knew that Li Xian had awakened a top-level martial soul, how could he be willing to let such a treasure like Li Xian practice next to the evil martial soul? Absolutely not. Li Xian saw Ma Xiaoyun's struggling expression and immediately understood his thoughts. He couldn't help but speak coldly, Grandpa Ma Xiaoyu, you are worried about the impact of Yuexi's martial spirit on me, but what I want to say is that Yuexi came here with me. If you don't agree to let her stay here, then I will leave too. Hey, what are you thinking, little guy? I don't have that kind of idea. Hearing that Li Xian was thinking of leaving, Matthew Nock became anxious. He is already over 80 years old and knows that he has no hope in this life. Now there is a child with a top-level martial spirit in front of him, and he must not let him get away. Your martial soul has the attribute of light, and it is also a top-level martial soul. If you hadn't mentioned it, I wouldn't have noticed it. It seems, it can suppress the evil power in the main UXI phantom martial soul, hehe. Li Xian, you are such a kind child. Ma Xianyu rubbed Li Xian's head. His words were both encouraging and came from the heart. Now, he understood that he could not attack Yuexi today no matter what. On the contrary, in order to keep Li Xian, UXI became his bargaining chip. However, Matthew Nord is highly respected and he will not use this to do anything dirty. He is mainly concerned about Li Xian's safety. In that case, Yuexi can stay, right? Li Xian walked to Yuexi, wiped the tears from the girl's face, and then smiled and said, don't cry, Yuexi, you can stay here. It's a coincidence that my martial spirit can help you. You can practice as usual like everyone else. UXI had tears in her eyes and blinked her big eyes with a look of gratitude. She also saw the scene where Li Xian released his martial spirit just now. Until this moment, she was still a little shocked. Thank you, Li Xian. You're welcome. We come from the same place, so it's only natural for us to help each other. Li Xian smiled slightly and used his palm to wipe away the last tear from Yuexi's cheek. Touching the girl's face, an inexplicable feeling rose from the bottom of his heart again. The cool electric current flowed along his arm into his body. Li Xian became more and more certain that UXI and his strength could complement each other. The two poles not only repel each other, but at certain moments, they can also blend together. Ma Xiaoyu came over and suggested, I can let Yuexi stay, but Li Xian, you have to think clearly. She needs you to be with her all the time during her cultivation in the future. You can't be careless. If you can't do that, it will be equivalent to harming her. Suppressing the evil martial spirit is definitely not as easy as you think. Li Xian smiled and said, if my martial spirit can't suppress it, then it can't be called a top martial spirit, right? That's true. Ma Xianyu was at a loss for words when he heard Li Xian's words. That's right. If a top-level light-attributed martial soul can't suppress the power of the evil martial soul, wouldn't that prove that the martial soul is no good? Oh, by the way. Su Yuntao's intelligence today said that you have an innate 6th level soul power, right? Thinking of something, Ma Xianyu asked again immediately. Li Xian showed a half-smile, I'm not sure either, Grandpa Ma, how about you help me test it? Without Li Xian's reminder, Ma Xianyu immediately ran to find the soul power crystal. When he came back again, a blue crystal ball appeared in his hand. Li Xian recognized at a glance the familiar appearance of the item that Su Yuntao used to test their soul power. Ma Xianyu showed anticipation, because top-level martial spirits usually appear with innate full soul power. Although Li Xian's martial spirit appeared in a mutated form, since he has soul power, it is usually at the maximum level. Come on, put your hand on it. Ma Xianyu controls the soul crystal. Hearing this, Li Xian also put his palm on it. The crystal ball handed to him was already lit up with a hazy light before he even touched it. The light was not strong, corresponding to Li Xian's soul warrior realm. However, with the release of Li Xian's soul power, the crystal immediately flashed dazzlingly. The light was bright and extremely clear, and the entire crystal was filled with the light from within. Full-level soul power. It is indeed full-level soul power. Ma Xianyu verified what he thought in his mind, and a look of deep surprise appeared on his face. As for Li Xian, he was much calmer. Although his martial soul was a top-level martial soul, if he had not practiced the Xian Gong given to him by Xiao San, this kind of martial soul should not have a companion soul power. As for the 10th level soul power, it was entirely acquired through his own cultivation bit by bit. It seems that Su Yuntao is not only short-sighted, but also has a loose skin. No one has supervised him during this period, and he can even make mistakes in basic work. Matthew was happy but also very angry. Not only did Su Yuntao misidentify Li Xian's martial soul, he also failed to measure his soul power correctly. There is a huge difference between level 6 and full soul power. Is he just a freeloader? Li Xian noticed Matthew's expression and his heart skipped a beat. When he awakened his martial soul, his soul power was indeed level 6. If Matthew blamed Su Yuntao and the two of them argued, trouble would easily arise. Li Xian coughed and said quickly, Grandpa Ma, actually when I awakened my martial soul this morning, my soul power was at level 6 at first. But when I got home, I could feel the soul power in my body increasing continuously. It seemed to be because of my martial soul. By the evening, my soul power was at the maximum level. I think brother Su Yuntao didn't make the wrong test as he did. Is there such a thing? Ma Xianyu was stunned for a moment. That's really strange, the top martial spirits really have a side that has not been studied clearly. Ma Xianyu would not doubt a child's words. In his opinion, perhaps this was the legendary martial soul's return of power. After Li Xian mentioned this, he valued Li Xian's martial soul even more. That magical medicine is definitely a top-level martial spirit with a very high upper limit. Your soul power is at the maximum level. You need to obtain soul rings to continue practicing. Li Xian, tomorrow I will ask the teachers in the academy. No, I will personally bring a few teachers to accompany you to the Soul Master Forest to hunt soul beasts. You can have a good rest when you go back tonight. Li Xian nodded, then I'll trouble you, Grandpa Ma. Haha, it doesn't matter. Once you join the spirit hall, you are one of us. Helping you hunt spirit beasts is what we adults should do. Ma Xiaonyuo looked at Yuexi again and said, I'm sorry for what happened just now. Grandpa didn't know there was a top-level light martial spirit here, and you suffered for nothing. I'll make it up to you for my rude behavior. In addition, although I allow you to stay in the spirit hall, the prerequisite is that you must stay by Li Xian's side all the time. In your future practice, you must listen to my advice, respond to any problems in a timely manner, and don't lie. Do you understand? Understood, Grandpa Ma. Yuexi sobbed and lowered her head slightly. At the same time, she looked at Li Xian out of the corner of her eye. Just now, when his palm touched her cheek, what was that strange burning sensation? It's warm and feels really comfortable. Chapter 9. Then I will send someone to take you two to the Junior Spirit Academy later. You will live in the dormitory arranged by the academy. Don't think too much when you go back. Try to rest early. Grandpa will come to find you tomorrow. Got it, Grandpa Ma, thank you. Li Xian nodded. In that case, I still have some things to sort out here. You two can just go to my office or wait in the lobby. Good. Walking out of the soul power testing hall, Matthew walked hurriedly, and even his hands were shaking with excitement while walking. Top-level martial spirits have not appeared in Notting City for many years. This matter needs to be recorded as soon as possible and reported to the higher-level martial spirit hall. Machino knew clearly that a potential top-level martial spirit was of great significance to the spirit hall, and Li Xian's case would definitely attract attention from above. As for children with potential, the Soul Palace has never been stingy, and the allocation of training resources is also extremely amazing. Li Xian is now studying at the Soul Palace Academy in Notting City, and the branch palace can also benefit from it. As for Yuexi, Matthew was at a loss for the time being. However, he was not in a hurry, because Li Xian was just a simple child now, so he attached great importance to friendship. In the future, as his soul power increased, he would realize the importance of cultivation. By that time, Yuexi would no longer be a playmate to him, but more like a burden. There was no need to say anything, he would naturally forget about Yuexi. In Machino's eyes, Li Xian was just a kid. How could Li Xian realize the horror of the evil martial spirit? Ma Xiaonyuo has decided that when the relationship between Li Xian and Yuexi fades in the future, he will immediately expel Yuexi, seal her martial spirit, and send her back to the village. Here, Li Xian returned to the office holding Yuexi's hand, and the two sat down and waited quietly. Yuexi was greatly stimulated, with tears on her face and sobbing from time to time. She also felt uneasy about the environment here. Fortunately, Li Xian was by my side, and I felt better staying close to him. She was not very good at speaking and had just met Li Xian today. She was filled with gratitude but didn't know how to express it. Thinking that her closeness was a bit rude, she kept turning her face away and did not dare to face Li Xian. Li Xian took in all these details out of the corner of his eye. He didn't say anything and tried to remain quiet so as not to embarrass Yuexi. The two waited in the office for about a quarter of an hour. Li Xian heard the sound of high heels stepping on the corridor. He couldn't help but stand up. Soon, a young and beautiful woman pushed open the office door and walked in. You. After the woman entered the room, she looked around and was about to ask something when she found that only Li Xian and Yuexi were sitting in the office. She paused for a moment. Euro okay, my name is Rira, and Master Ma asked us to pick you up. Sorry for the long wait. The woman was in her early 20s, wearing a black miniskirt and a blue shirt. Her short hair was black and neat. Li Xian could tell at a glance that she should be a teacher at the Junior Soul Academy. Hello, Sister Rira. Li Xian took Yuexi's hand and stood up. The teacher Rira in front of him was very young. She had been dealing with children for many years, and her gentleness was written on her face. However, Li Xian felt that her delicate facial features looked familiar. She looked very similar to the woman Su Yuntao was good friends with. Come on, do you have any luggage? The teacher will help you with it. It's very late now and we have to get back before lights out. Rira bent down to hold Li Xian and Yuexi's hands respectively, but Li Xian deliberately avoided them. Brother Su Yuntao brought us here. The luggage has been delivered. So that's how it is. You are Li Xian, right? You are amazing. Rira looked at Yuexi who was lowering her head on the left, and thought of what Machino said. She forced a smile, but swallowed back what she wanted to say, and the hand she was holding felt a little unnatural. The carriage is downstairs, let's go quickly. After saying that, she casually loosened her palm, rubbed Yuexi's head, and walked quickly in front. Seeing this, Li Xian pulled Yuexi and said with a smile, let's go, we can go to the academy now. Nottingham City, Junior Soul Palace Academy. Here, it is about 10 kilometers away from the Spirit Hall. In order to provide convenient services to Soul Masters, the Spirit Hall was built in the center of the town. The geographical requirements of the Soul Master Academy are not very high, so its location is naturally a bit remote. The carriage drove for about 30 minutes, and several people got off. Then, Rira quickly walked to the guard, said a few words to the security guard, and came back again with 3 or 4 large bags in her hands. These were exactly the luggage of Li Xian and Yuexi. What surprised Li Xian was that although he and Yuexi did not have much luggage, it weighed 20 kilograms together. Teacher Rira seemed to be carrying the big bag without much effort. She waved and asked the two to catch up. Li Xian knew in his heart that Teacher Rira must also be a soul master. Soul masters have soul power in their bodies, and their physical qualities will improve through continuous practice. Holding Yuexi's hand, Li Xian followed and observed the surroundings at the same time. The gate of Notting City Junior Soul Master Academy is very wide. After entering the gate, there is a playground on one side. The teaching building with flashing lights in the back is a 3-story structure. It is very late now, and the entire teaching building is dark. Li Xian heard some noisy sounds coming from the playground at this time. The people on the playground were all children, some playing ball and some running. Rira noticed the situation and said with a smile, Nottingham Junior College has 6 grades in total. Those are your seniors. You are still young, and the college requires juniors to get enough sleep. Now is not your time for activities. Li Xian nodded and looked at the students on the playground. Judging from the way they were moving around, Nottingham Junior College was not a high-pressure environment. Everyone was relaxed and not subject to any constraints. Yuexi was also looking at the playground. After leaving the spirit hall, she felt much more relaxed. She was so absorbed in watching everyone playing with each other that it was only until Li Xian pulled her that she reacted and caught up. The entire academy is not very big, similar to the primary school in the previous life. Rira walked in front and gave Li Xian and Yuexi a general introduction to the environment here. Behind the teaching building is the cafeteria, and as for the dormitories, they are a little further back. Although it is a junior college, the college also requires male and female students to sleep separately. However, the first-year students are relatively relaxed. For the sake of ease of management, dormitories are built in the same place, but the rooms are separate. However, it was too late now. When teacher Rira brought Li Xian and the other person to the dormitory, the administrator only gave them one key and told them to stay with the second-year students for one night and arrange for their separate dormitories tomorrow. After getting the key, Rira said with an apologetic look on her face, I'm sorry, little ones. The school has just started and the dormitories in the academy are in short supply. You will temporarily live with the senior students. I'll take you there first and then go to the cafeteria to get you dinner. It's okay, Sister Rira. Li Xian didn't feel anything was wrong. The dormitory for lower grades was probably mixed, so the environment was just a little noisy. The key turned, and a dormitory with the lights still on opened. Teacher Rira placed their luggage on the cabinet. Li Xian and Yuexi followed them in, and the smell of instant noodles hit their noses. This is a 6-person dormitory on the first floor. The 4 students in the room were caught off guard by the sudden arrival of Rira and the other 2, and their playful activities suddenly stopped. One of the 7 or 8-year-old male students who was lying on the lower bunk immediately stood up and said, Teacher Rira, why are you here? He smiled and pulled out a chair, quickly placing it behind Rira. The other 3 male students in the dormitory also stood up immediately. Wang Xiaodong, I brought 2 new students with me. They will stay in your dormitory for one night. Upon hearing this, the student named Wang Xiaodong's eyes turned and he immediately said, I understand, teacher. There are just 2 beds left in our dormitory. My junior is short, so I will make room for them. As he spoke, he rolled up his bed and put it on the upper bunk. Then he came to Li Xian and Yuexi, and pulled the 2 of them over with a smile. Teacher Rira, just let them live here, no problem. Rira gently tucked her hair, feeling a little relieved, well, they just arrived, please take care of them in your dormitory. I'll go to the cafeteria first, you guys get along well. Understood teacher. Don't worry. Teacher Rira. Wang Xiaodong's hands were not idle. He took out bedding from the cabinet and helped Li Xian and the other man make the bed. When he saw that Yuexi was a girl, his hands became more diligent. I can do it myself. Yuexi took the bedding and indicated that she could do these small jobs herself. Wang Xiaodong laughed and refused, that won't work. You just arrived, and as a senior, it's my duty to take care of you. As he said this, he pushed the 2 people away, which surprised Li Xian a little. At the door, the teacher who saw the scene smiled softly and left with peace of mind. Master Machino asked him to take good care of the 2 children, but there was no empty room at the moment, so he had no choice but to do so. Fortunately, Li Xian got along well with these older children. Here, after teacher Rira left, the people who were helping to make the bed in Li Xian's dormitory suddenly slowed down their movements. Wang Xiaodong glanced at Li Xian, especially at the white linen clothes that Li Xian was wearing, and turned his eyes away indifferently. Then he looked at the pretty Yuexi and smiled, where are you from, junior sister? My name is Wang Xiaodong, I'm 1 year older than you, and I'm your senior. As he spoke, Wang Xiaodong took the bed sheet from Yuexi, shook it gently, and spread it on the mattress. Yuexi didn't say anything, her eyes passed Wang Xiaodong and looked at Li Xian. Schoolgirl, I'm talking to you, why are you shy? I'm the boss of this dormitory, you can tell me if you're unhappy. Also, don't underestimate me because I'm only 1 year older than you. I'm almost a soul master. By the way, do you know teacher Rira? Yuexi shook her head. Seeing this, Wang Xiaodong's eyes rolled around and he had some thoughts in his mind. On the other side, 3 boys came over and asked, Brother Dong, what do you say? I'll do it this way. You guys go help my junior brother. Okay. As for Li Xian, he did not accept the kindness of several people. These people came to help him on their own initiative, but it was like a dead plaster, and he was helpless. After sitting in the carriage for a whole day, Li Xian was already tired. He was waiting for teacher Rura to bring him the meal. All he wanted to do was eat and then go to sleep. What you do? At this moment, Yuxi's voice came from the bed with his back to him, and Li Xian looked over. Immediately. Chapter 10. Yuxi was holding the luggage, and Wang Xiaodong next to her raised his hands with an innocent look on his face. Hey, sorry junior, I just wanted to help you pack your things, I didn't mean it. These, I can do it myself. The backpack that Yuxi was holding tightly in her arms was the luggage she brought from home. Wang Xiaodong quickly apologized and continued to help Yuxi make the bed. At this time, Yuxi came over with her backpack and whispered, Li Xian, can I live here? Will you sleep with me? Li Xian said bluntly. Yuxi didn't say anything, but just stared at Li Xian with her big wrinkled eyes. After thinking for a while, Li Xian said a few words in Yuxi's ear, then patted her shoulder gently, and Yuxi sat obediently on his bed. On the opposite side, Wang Xiaodong looked unhappy when he saw Yuxi chose to stay next to Li Xian. Thinking that he had helped so much but was left out in the cold, he angrily threw the bed sheet on the bed, glared at Li Xian and walked away. Seeing this, the other three boys walked over, and Wang Xiaodong hugged them and walked to the corner. Feeling the malicious gazes from several people, Li Xian frowned slightly. However, he was already very tired at the moment, so he sat down on the bed, supporting himself with his hands to relax his body. Looking at Uxi beside him, Li Xian said softly, You are the only girl in the dormitory. It is indeed inconvenient. I will talk to teacher Rura when she comes back. It's okay. Uxi nodded. At this moment, Li Xian suddenly noticed that Wang Xiaodong and several others formed a circle, deliberately blocking his view, and then walked to the cabinet where he placed his luggage, and there was a rustling sound coming from it. Li Xian frowned and immediately stood up and walked over. Are you looking through my things? The luggage brought from home was opened by Wang Xiaodong and his two companions, and the clothes in the luggage were turned into a mess. Wang Xiaodong turned around and said with a fake smile, No, I just wanted to help you find some toiletries. I saw you were very tired, so I should help you. Faced with such shamelessness, Li Xian was speechless and said calmly, Teacher Rura will be back later. If you want to flip through the pages, just continue. I'll tell her. Wang Xiaodong didn't expect that teacher Rura would come back. When he heard this, his face changed and he turned around and asked the younger brother next to him to stop what he was doing. His expression was naturally much colder. He glanced at Li Xian and walked towards his bed with a sneer. A quarter of an hour later, teacher Rura came back with a lunchbox. Li Xian didn't want to make any noise, so he just told her that Yuxi was not convenient to stay in the dormitory. In response to this situation, Rura looked embarrassed. Before coming, Ma Shanyo had already explained the details, including the matter of Yuxi's evil martial spirit. Especially when thinking of Master Matthew's warning, teacher Rura looked at Yuxi with a somewhat uncomfortable look. Biting her red lips gently, she hesitated for a moment and apologized, I'm sorry, Yuxi. Teacher has something going on at home, so it's really inconvenient today. I'd like to ask you to stay for one night. Just one night is enough. This was originally a request from both of them. Seeing that Rura did not agree, Yuxi naturally did not say much and just lowered her head. She is not a fool, how can she not feel the disgust others have for her? Li Xian opened his mouth. Teacher Rura's statement was far-fetched. He guessed in his heart that it might be because of Uxi's evil martial spirit. Before leaving, Rura specifically called Li Xiaodong over and warned him, get along well with your juniors and don't bully them. Wang Xiaodong patted his chest with a solemn oath, how could that be, teacher Rura, we will definitely take good care of our juniors. Well, that'll do. After teacher Rura left, Yuxi had no choice but to stay. Li Xian dragged the desk over and temporarily used it as a dining table. The lunch boxes for the two of them were large and the meals were rich. The lunch box brought by teacher Rura contained scrambled eggs with tomatoes, shredded pork with green peppers, and a few pieces of braised pork. It was a rich dish that Li Xian could hardly eat on ordinary days. Plus, he was hungry, so he ate voraciously without caring about his image. Yuxi had learned her lesson during the day and didn't dare to look at Li Xian while eating. She covered her nose and ate carefully. Bang! At this moment, there was a sudden crisp sound, and the two people who were eating saw darkness in front of them. It turned out that the lights in the dormitory were turned off. Wang Xiaodong said lazily, I'm sorry, juniors, it's too late and we need to rest. The school requires lights to be turned off at this time. In the dormitory, the others also went to bed and began to yawn. Because Yuxi ate carefully, there was still most of the food in her lunchbox. When the lights were turned off, it was somewhat affected. Li Xian raised his eyebrows, his expression turned cold as he listened to these harsh words. Outside the window, the lights in the dormitory next door were still on, and it was obviously not time to turn off the lights yet. Wang Xiaodong was unhappy because he was humiliated in front of them, so he was taking revenge. Li Xian didn't want to worry too much. He just wanted to have a good rest and get enough energy to obtain the soul ring tomorrow. He walked to the balcony and opened both windows to the outside. The moonlight shone in, making the room much brighter. However, before Li Xian could sit down, Wang Xiaodong on the upper bunk pulled the curtains up again, muttering, it's a bit too bright, Junior brother, go to bed early. In front of me, I could only see a pair of blinking eyes on Yuxi's face. The table was pitch black and I couldn't see anything clearly. Li Xian couldn't help but feel a little angry. Even if he could sleep, it wouldn't hurt to take a while longer. They had only eaten for 2 minutes. Li Xian stood up and patted Wang Xiaodong on the upper bunk. I have something to ask you. With his hands crossed behind his pillow, Wang Xiaodong, who was looking contented, was pushed and turned his head lazily. He looked down at Li Xian and asked in a neutral tone, is there anything I can do for you, junior brother? What's your soul power level? Level 9, any problem? Wang Xiaodong sneered. Okay then. Li Xian grabbed Wang Xiaodong's shirt collar and before he could react, he dragged him out from under the quilt, then dragged him down from the upper bunk and hit him on the head with his other fist. Boom. Ouch. Ah. The first crisp sound was Wang Xiaodong falling off the bed and hitting his head on the table, and the second sound was him getting punched and letting out a shrill wail. It was dark in the dormitory, and Li Xian's fists were fast. In just a few breaths, Wang Xiaodong was hit in the face 5 or 6 times. Before the wailing sound from his mouth could vent, Li Xian knocked him unconscious, then picked him up with both hands and threw him onto the bed again. What's going on? What's that sound? Brother Dong. In the dormitory, the other 3 boys heard the sound, stood up and looked around. However, the view in the room was dim, and the curtains were drawn by Wang Xiaodong, so the people only heard the sounds of fists and kicks, and nothing else. The boy on the lower bunk next to him clearly heard Wang Xiaodong's screams. He walked over in the dark in his slippers. He first bumped into Li Xian, who didn't say anything. Then he pushed Wang Xiaodong on the bed. Brother Dong, Brother Dong. Wang Xiaodong was already fast asleep at this moment and did not respond. Did I hear you wrong? The boy pushed him a few times, but Wang Xiaodong still didn't respond. He felt depressed, he fell asleep so quickly. What's wrong? Someone asked. I don't know, Brother Dong seems to have fallen asleep. The boy in the lower bunk was puzzled. Well. Still asleep. Li Xian sat down to eat again and interrupted. There was silence in the dormitory for a moment, and no one spoke. They certainly didn't expect that Wang Xiaodong was knocked unconscious. Not to mention that such things were rare, Wang Xiaodong's soul power was very high. They would not associate the newcomer Li Xian with this ability. Opposite, Uxi, who had a panoramic view of everything, ate silently. There was a hint of guilt on her face, as she saw the real situation clearly. Of course, Uxi would not tell this to anyone. After all, Wang Xiaodong and his friends have been causing trouble since they arrived in this dormitory. Although they pretended to be helpful, Uxi was not stupid. It was obvious that Wang Xiaodong and his friends wanted to show off in front of teacher Rura. Eat and sleep. Li Xian packed up the lunchbox and threw it into the trash can, then walked over and gently put his little hand on Uxi's head. Uxi ate faster, and after Wang Xiaodong was dealt with, she went to sleep peacefully. The night passed slowly. Li Xian was not asleep. He sat on the bed and circulated Xian Gong in his body. In this way, not only can his body get a rest, but his cultivation will also not fall behind. When he obtains the spirit ring, the spirit power accumulated in his body will be released. On the other side, Li Xian kept a part of his mind on keeping an eye on Wang Xiaodong at all times, in case the boy suddenly woke up. However, until dawn, Li Xian found that the guy on the upper bunk had no reaction, and he knew he was overthinking it. With just a few punches like that, it would be impossible to wake up until noon. Early in the morning, in front of the balcony outside the dormitory, Li Xian looked towards the east with a gleam of light flickering in his eyes. A ray of purple air floated in the hazy mist in the sky. Li Xian practiced his skills and captured the purple mist. Then he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let the foul air flow out through the tip of his nose. As the purple mist in the sky dissipated and golden light gradually pierced through the sky, Li Xian couldn't help but wonder what would happen if he adjusted the time of the Sunday. Of course, Li Xian would only think about such boring things, he would not really do them. Li Xian. The sound of tiptoeing had already been caught in his ears. After hearing Xi speak, Li Xian turned his head. Get up so early. Uxi wore yesterday's dress, simply washed her face, and then walked out. Her big eyes were slightly red and swollen, obviously she did not sleep well because of what happened yesterday. I'm going out with Master Ma and the others today, but when the master comes, I'll have him send someone to settle you down first. Li Xian was worried that Wang Xiaodong would take revenge on him after he woke up, and would target Uxi if he couldn't find him, so he planned to ask Master Ma for help directly. As the manager of the Notting City Wuhan branch hall, Master Ma can still do this. Is it for the spirit ring? I heard from my grandfather that you can only get it by hunting spirit beasts. You have to be careful. Uxi pursed her lips, a little worried. Master Ma is following us, as are the teachers from the academy. It's okay. Li Xian smiled and walked out to the balcony. Wang Xiaodong was still sleeping on the upper bunk, and the other 3 people were still shouting. Let's go. Li Xian picked up his and Uxi's luggage and walked out of the dormitory directly. Soon, Machino arrived at the college on time, accompanied by 2 teachers from the school. Li Xian told him what happened last night, which made Machino stunned. Li Xian, do you think that boy was the one who started the trouble first? Yes, I do. Li Xian nodded. Okay, I'll send someone to take care of it, don't worry about it. I'm going to help you hunt soul beasts today. Let's go eat something first. Mashano obviously did not take this matter to heart and promised to resolve the problem. This was also the reason why Li Xian dared to take action. The other two teachers who appeared with him were quite old, and they kept looking at Li Xian on the way. They knew about Li Xian's martial soul from Mashano, so they paid more attention to Li Xian and kept staring at Li Xian, with a mixture of scrutiny and expectation in their eyes. Li Xian took Yuexi with him. After breakfast, Mashano asked the teachers to deal with the dormitory matters. Li Xian was finally relieved. He said hello to Yuexi and left the college. Matthew Newell led a group of people on a horse-drawn carriage to the Soul Beast Forest, which is the closest to Notting City. It would take 2 days on foot to get there, so they had to get up early and try to reach the forest before noon. Li Xian, this is Dean Su from the academy, and the one next to him is Director Luo. They got up early because of your matter. Little guy, our spirit hall has mobilized a large number of troops for you this time. Student Li Xian, meet Dean Su, meet Director Luo. Li Xian immediately spoke respectfully. Dean Su is over 70 years old, with a white beard. He has a gentle face and his eyes narrow when he smiles. I heard that there is a top-level martial spirit among the freshmen of the academy this year, so I wanted to take a look yesterday. Haha, yes, but it was too late then, and I was afraid to disturb your rest. When I saw him today, it turned out to be just as I thought, a good seedling. Director Luo has a hearty laugh. He is younger, probably in his early 60s, and is the strongest among the group. Li Xian said embarrassedly, I don't know if it is a top-level martial spirit, thank you for your praise, grandpas. After Mashano's introduction, Li Xian knew that these two people, like Mashano, were great soul masters below level 30. The Dean's martial soul was a stone sparrow, which was agile attack type, while Director Luo's martial soul was a tortoise, which was defensive type. These two elders' martial spirits, one for attack and one for defense, plus Matthew's control type martial spirit, cauliflower snake, form a very complete combination. It is definitely enough for them to help Li Xian obtain the first spirit ring. Ma Xiaoyunyo suddenly thought of something and said, Li Xian, the information I investigated last night shows that your martial soul is indeed some kind of fairy grass. That green plant is very similar to the legendary fairy grass called Kingxiu string moonvine. However, the Kingxiu string moonvine recorded in the book does not bloom and is a herbaceous fairy plant. This is very strange. Haha, that's why it's called a top-level martial spirit. If you can investigate it thoroughly, then Li Xian's martial spirit will lose value. Director Luo sat down next to Li Xian and said with a smile, release your martial spirit for us to see. Old man Ma is old, so it's normal that he can't remember things. With the vision of Dean Su and I, we will definitely be able to recognize that immortal plant. Li Xian glanced at the burly Director Luo and smiled, okay. After saying that, he spread out his palm, and a green plant grew out of it. The Kingxiu crescent vine climbed up step by step, and the whole body was emerald green. After growing upwards half a foot, the leaves began to grow in all directions, and on the tip of each leaf, there grew a cluster of flower buds. The flower buds bloom slightly, releasing a refreshing fragrance throughout the body, the petals sway softly, and the golden and purple colors exude an ethereal atmosphere. For a moment, Director Luo and Dean Su were stunned. As a martial spirit, it can actually emit fragrance like real flowers and plants. It's incredible. Its scent is pure and flawless. Look, especially the buds. They don't seem to have fully bloomed yet. That's right, it's a top-level martial spirit. It's worthy of being a top-level martial spirit. Forgive my poor eyesight, I have never seen this before. But this flower looks so familiar, its buds are about to bloom, and its shape is like a chrysanthemum. Have I seen this kind of flower? Somewhere. Chapter 11. Inside the carriage, Dean Su carefully looked at the flower blooming from the martial spirit in Li Xian's hand, his slender eyes almost moving closer to it, but the purple and gold buds had not yet fully bloomed. He felt that it seemed familiar, but he was not sure. Director Luo suddenly thought of something, and his expression changed. Hey, don't you think Li Xian's martial spirit is quite similar to the symbol in our soul hall token? His words made Ma Xiaoyunyo and Director Su stunned at the same time, and their eyes turned to the two-color chrysanthemum on the top. At this moment, there was a jolt outside the carriage. The coachman hurriedly pulled the reins, and the people in the carriage fell forward heavily due to inertia. Master Matthew, the road ahead is blocked, please come down and take a look. Immediately afterwards, the driver's voice came from outside. Dean Su sat up straight, looked at each other with Machinyo, and immediately got out of the car to check. The collision just now caused Li Xian's head to hit the wooden board of the carriage. He was rubbing his head at this time, and his martial soul was also taken into his body. Director Luo, who wanted to observe Wuhan carefully, had to retract his gaze and muttered to himself. It's inexplicable. Rubbing his head, Li Xian also jumped off the carriage. This was a road paved with blue stones. The trees planted on both sides reached into the sky. The shade of the trees blocked the sunlight overhead, and the light and shadow formed circles and hit Li Xian's handsome face. Not far away, Ma Xiaoyunyo and Dean Su were negotiating. The road in front of the carriage was blocked, and several people in Spirit Hall uniforms were blocking the way. They are one of us. What happened? Why do you want to block the road here? Director Luo took a look and strode over. The Soul Beast Forest that they were going to today was an exclusive place for raising soul beasts within the Spirit Hall. Usually such places were guarded, but there must be other reasons for blocking the outer areas. Li Xian did not follow. He stood at a distance and watched. The Soul Palace guards who set up the checkpoints were wearing silver and red armor. On the armor were 3 symbols of sword, ghost, and chrysanthemum. Not only that, those guards were awe-inspiring and exuded a majestic aura. It seemed that their soul power must be very high, which was not comparable to Master Ma and others. Li Xian was slightly surprised. Only the people in the spirit hall could wear this kind of attire, and spirit halls of that level were all built in the big cities of the empire. They actually appeared here. Beside him, the coachman got off the carriage cursing, and used this opportunity to feed water to the horses and check the place where the wheels had just stumbled. It was obvious that in his eyes, only his own carriage was important, and he had to ensure that the carriage could travel smoothly. Li Xian waited patiently. Less than 2 breaths later, Master Ma and his companions came back. The guards behind them were still standing there. The 4 of them had upright postures and their sharp eyes were like steel knives. What's wrong, Grandpa Ma? Li Xian asked when he saw this. Hey, let's take a rest first. They didn't tell us the specific situation, they just asked us to wait. It should be that the big shots from above have come and are doing something inside. Ma Xianyou looked helpless. After all, he was the person in charge of the Notting City Wuhan branch hall, but he was left aside, which made him feel ashamed. Similarly, Dean Su and Director Luo also suffered a setback. Facing the more advanced Soul Palace guards, they had no way of doing anything. Big shot? Isn't the Soul Beast Forest ahead shared by all the Soul Masters of the Spirit Hall? They are hunting Soul Beasts, so they won't seal off the entire forest, right? Li Xian said in disbelief that this approach was too overbearing. From the perspective of the Spirit Hall's existence, the people above were clearly handling private matters. It should be, not as simple as hunting Soul Beasts. Dean Su said slowly, this Soul Beast Forest on the side mountain is the private property of the Spirit Hall. The Soul Beasts in it have cultivation levels ranging from 10 to 10,000 years, and the maximum age will not exceed 20,000 years. If the guards of the Spirit Hall are mobilized to seal off this forest just to hunt Soul Beasts, it would be unreasonable. Li Xian seemed to be thinking about something and nodded slightly. It seems that we can only continue to wait here. If it is too late, we can go to a nearby village or town to rest for a day and come back tomorrow morning. Matthew walked to the driver's seat and then sat down. Dean Su stroked his beard, staring ahead calmly with deep eyes. Only Director Luo could not sit still. He took out the dry food he brought with him and started eating here. He also gave some dried meat to Li Xian. Thank you, Director Luo. Li Xian had just finished breakfast and was not very hungry yet, so he took it and put it on his body. They had thought that the wait would last until at least the afternoon, or even tomorrow. However, the blockade was expected to end sooner, so they only stopped here for a quarter of an hour. There was a rustling of leaves, and then the guards in front moved the roadblocks to allow passage. Li Xian saw a group of people walking out in front of him. 2 of them were actually standing in the air and slowly descending from the tree. Moreover, the Soul Masters surrounding them all exuded a powerful aura. Let's go, it's all in vain again. There were 2 people in the air, one was wearing white clothes and had a tall figure. He sighed softly and stepped firmly on the ground. The man in white had an unparalleled temperament and a handsome face. His skin was illuminated by the sunlight and reflected a crystal-like luster. What surprised Li Xian was his gentle and melodious voice. He looked like a young man, but his voice was mixed with feminine voice. Just like his feminine temperament, it was impossible to tell whether it was male or female. A figure in black beside him spoke in a sinister voice. Where did she disappear back then? The only places she could have gone to were these nearby forests. The black-clad figure spoke in a low voice and exuded a cold aura. What was even more shocking was that his face was completely hidden in the shadows, and even his body was like a ghost, with his clothes swaying when he walked. If he hadn't made a sound, Li Xian would have thought he had seen a ghost. The direction the 2 people were walking towards was exactly the direction of the carriage where Li Xian was. The Soul Masters surrounding the 2 people were all very powerful, all wearing the clothes that were only available in the main hall of martial souls. The youngest one looked to be in his 30s. It was obvious that their cultivation was definitely not too low. If I were her, I would definitely turn back. It's more dangerous to wander out. In my opinion, it's completely useless. The figure in white said femininely. The Pope's actions have a side that we can't imagine. Perhaps the fish that slipped through the net is really hiding nearby. Hearing the words of the black-clothed figure, the young man in white sneered and waved his hand with a bored look. Forget it, go back, reporting it will be fruitless. Yes, sir. The 4 Soul Masters who were guarding here immediately took back the roadblocks, then they reined in the horses and placed all the belongings on their backs. Behind the crowd, Li Xian quietly practiced the Xiantian Inner Sutra, and he recorded all the conversation between the 2 people. As for Master Matthew and the others, they probably didn't hear it so clearly. When they saw the other party's formation, they whispered to each other, and their attention was focused on the identities of these people. As the group of people came towards them, Ma Xianyou led the way and bowed respectfully from a distance. He knew that these people must be important figures in the spirit hall, not just the main hall. 2 waves of figures crossed each other, and the young man in white seemed not to have seen Li Xian and his group. They ignored them and walked past them without even glancing at them. After walking for dozens of meters, the young man in white came with a faint voice, "Let them in, they are all our people." This sentence was obviously meant for the guards at the rear, and the guards responded immediately. It was not until then that Li Xian straightened his back and let out a long breath. The moment he came into contact with the figure in white, the soul power in his body was wildly agitated, as if it was being pulled by something and he almost couldn't suppress it. Moreover, in that second, two pairs of eyes swept over him at the same time. The boundless pressure carried by those eyes made Li Xian's whole body covered with goosebumps in just a moment, as if he was being looked at in detail. Those two have been keeping an eye on me. Li Xian muttered to himself, and felt a chill on his back, discovering that he was sweating. Li Xian didn't quite understand. In the eyes of the pedestrians just now, they clearly had no room for small figures like them from the Wuhan branch hall, but the two leading people never took their attention away from him. Li Xian immediately searched his memory. The characteristics of the group of people just now reminded him of two similar characters, Ghost Douluo and Chrysanthemum Douluo. Could it be them? But what is a titled Douluo doing here? Who is the fish that slipped through the net? Oh, it's all my fault for not watching the show carefully at the beginning. Li Xian frowned, doubting but at the same time dismissing this unrealistic idea. That shouldn't be possible. All the titled Douluo were in the Pope's palace now. How could such a person come to such a ghost place? Maybe he was overthinking it. On the other side, after the spirit hall's high-level leaders walked a distance, the young man in white who was leading them suddenly stopped, looked at the figure hidden in the shadows beside him, and smacked his lips softly. Old ghost, did you sense a familiar aura from that kid just now? With a chuckle, the figure next to him said in a harsh and hoarse voice, that's right, I have noticed the stench on you. I have been smelling it for so many years. Swish. Hearing this, the man in white immediately turned around, his eyes flashing with brilliance. His doubts disappeared from his face in the blink of an eye as his long eyebrows wrinkled. That boy seems to be a new student of the nearby Wuhan branch hall. Someone, go and find out his information for me. Is it possible that a golden phoenix will appear in such a remote place? The hoarse voice mocked, don't be shameless, I only sensed an aura similar to yours, and that kid also has a strong soul fluctuation, and it's more powerful than your chrysanthemum. The man in white was furious when he heard this, you damned devil. Looking back, watching the group of people go away, Machino straightened his back, rubbed his aching waist, and murmured to himself, hey, you are indeed a big shot. He doesn't even bother to look at old guys like us. Dean Su laughed and said, Master Su, you are already this old, it is important to enjoy your old age, why are you still thinking about those things? Hearing this, wrinkles appeared on Machino's old face. Yes, our generation is outdated. We should focus on the younger generation. Turning around, Ma Xiaonuo looked at Li Xian with a smile, patted his shoulder, and encouraged him, see, Li Xian, those are the high-ranking officials of the Wuhan main hall. You have to practice hard and become as powerful as them in the future. Li Xian scratched his face with his hands and smiled speechlessly. Is the purpose of cultivation to be powerful? It's more important to hurry on, Grandpa Ma. The time wasted was used to rest. The guards who stayed here removed the roadblocks, and Mathono led his group to continue on their journey. Time passed slowly as the carriage moved forward on the spacious bluestone road. What had just happened became an episode and was quickly forgotten by Li Xian. Half a day later, the carriage began to shake and the mountain road became steep and difficult to walk on. After walking for another quarter of an hour, Li Xian followed Master Ma and the others out of the carriage. The latter part of the mountain road should have been walked on foot, but in order to conserve Li Xian's strength, Machino asked the groom to walk a little longer. In the eyes of this master, Li Xian was now like a treasure who had to be taken good care of and not let him get tired at all. In comparison, the carriage is the Soul Palace's own property, and such things can be reimbursed if damaged. After a short reorganization, the group took dry food, weapons and insect and snake repellent powder, crossed the hill in front of them, and then entered today's destination, the Soul Beast Forest. Chapter 12. In the forest, the air is fresh and cool, with a faint fragrance of earth. Ma Xiaonuo said, Li Xian, this Soul Beast Forest is raised by the Spirit Hall for low-level soul masters. Most of the soul beasts in it are only 10 or 100 years old. This time we are going to hunt a 100-year soul beast for you. It would be best if the soul beast has reached 300 years of cultivation. That way, it can bring the greatest improvement to your soul power. Dean Su smiled and said, have you noticed that the air in the forest is humid and there are many aquatic plants growing there? In fact, there is also a soul beast forest around Nodding City. The reason why we brought you here is that the soul beasts in this forest are mainly plants, and your martial soul is a plant-based one, which matches it. Li Xian was puzzled and said, I have heard that plant-type spirit masters can also absorb animal-type spirit rings. Is it necessary to be so strict in this regard? Ma Xiaonuo said seriously, that's just a rumor from some crazy people, don't believe it easily. You have to know that martial souls and spirit rings have different properties. Not only is it unsafe, but it will also backfire. In the past, although there have been examples of plant-type spirit masters successfully absorbing animal-type spirit rings, that approach is too extreme, don't imitate it. The method of hunting soul beasts and obtaining soul rings has become very stable after hundreds of years of summary by our predecessors. We just need to do it. Dean Su said with a smile. So that's how it is. I understand. Li Xian nodded when he heard that. Director Luo came over, rubbed Li Xian's head, and said cheerfully, you must not go astray in your cultivation path, and try not to do risky behaviors. Now that you haven't obtained your first spirit ring yet, it's time to lay the foundation. We have planned it for you. Li Xian was puzzled and immediately asked, what does planning mean? Dean Su spoke in a deep tone, stroking his beard and said, the cultivation of a soul master is generally based on the martial soul. For example, my white bird martial soul is most suitable for developing into the agile attack system. But I took the wrong path back then, and my first soul ring absorbed an 80-year-old fish soul beast. This also caused my first soul skill to lean towards the fierce attack system, which is not in line with the agile attack system. Now my soul power has stagnated, and it is difficult to develop further. Soul master training is divided into agility attack, power attack, control, defense, and auxiliary. The auxiliary is further divided into food, gain, treatment, etc. Li Xian, your martial soul is a fairy medicine. After our discussion, we think the control system is the best. Ma Xiaonuo took over and said, yes, although this choice will limit your overall offensive ability and make you weaker than the strong attacking spirit masters of the same level in the middle stage of cultivation, if you can achieve a titled Douluo in the future, then you will understand how important it is to make a firm and appropriate choice. Looking at the solemn gazes of the three people, Li Xian also nodded, students will remember this. Thank you Grandpa Ma and the Dean for your concern. Li Xian only had a vague understanding of these theories, but he believed that the experience of Master Mishano and the two teachers from the academy could not be wrong. After all, they were very old and the experience they had gained in their long lives must be far greater than his own. The offensive ability of the plant system is not as good as that of the weapon spirit and the beast spirit. The control system can better demonstrate its power, and the cultivation remains the same from beginning to end. As an outsider, Li Xian also thinks that Master Ma and others are right. Ma Xiaonuo said, we have also thought about your first martial spirit for you. There are 3 kinds of spirit beasts that can be used as targets. Now let's go to the first place. Good. Time passed quickly. As we walked around in the forest, the sun had already set in the west, and the light in the forest was softer than at noon. With 3 theoretical masters leading the way, Li Xian did not encounter any danger in the forest. He was attacked by soul beasts twice, but Dinsu managed to get rid of them with a little effort. Just like that, after walking through the forest for a while, they came to a swamp. I saw that the forest in front of me was a little wider, and many trees were withered and submerged in a swamp full of duckweed. There was a fishy smell in the air. Mashino took out a bottle, shook out some dust from it and sprinkled it around. Li Xian stepped on it and found that the mud no longer stuck to his feet. We will help you capture the soul beast, but you must complete the attack. At the same time, you can only absorb the soul ring for 1 hour. I have said this on the way, and I will emphasize it again. Don't forget it later. Li Xian nodded heavily, understood. During their previous advance, they passed by their target location twice, but unfortunately, they did not encounter the ideal soul beast. Now this quagmire is the 3rd target. Machinyo and Dinsu looked solemn. They had wasted too long and must find a suitable soul beast here. We are going to hunt down an aquatic plant-type soul beast named Ghost Water Aster for you. This creature is very cunning and likes to hide in ordinary plants. However, we think it is the most suitable target for your first soul ring. Li Xian, wait for us nearby. With several masters guiding him, Li Xian didn't need to work at all. He couldn't help but sigh, it was such a good feeling to be favored. Boom! Suddenly there was a violent fluctuation. At this time, Mashino and Director Luo were being taken above the swamp by Dinsu. Just as the 3 of them flew a short distance, they were attacked by a giant frog. The frog had black stripes on its body and was half the size of an adult. It suddenly jumped out, flicked its tongue, and rolled towards the 3 people, wanting to kill them all at once. Dean, be careful. This process happened so quickly that Li Xian on the shore couldn't help but sweat. Damn it. Delusion. But at this moment, Director Luo shouted loudly, and the soul rings on his body appeared. 2 soul rings, 1 white and 1 yellow, floated out. Among them, the yellow 100-year soul ring shone brightly, forming a yellow stone wall that directly blocked the frog's attack. Snort. Then, Matthew released his martial spirit, and 2 yellow spirit rings appeared. He activated his second spirit skill, and more than a dozen small snakes made of spirit power fell from his body. The small snakes fell on the giant frog and kept biting it. The giant frog gurgled, shook its body violently, and immediately escaped into the mud. At the last moment, Dinsu, who was flying in the air, had a bright light in his eyes. His second yellow soul ring flashed, and an arc of light followed the frog into the swamp. A flash of blood flew, and the frog that had just escaped into the swamp screamed, and then its white belly turned up. Li Xian! Come over here and finish off the enemy, let's practice. Director Luo shouted. Li Xian rolled up his trouser legs and trotted over immediately. The edge of the swamp was not deep, and he came to the center area by stepping on the mud. At this moment, the giant frog was still breathing in its mouth, and its yellow vertical pupils were full of murderous intent, staring at Li Xian closely. Li Xian didn't want to tolerate it. He mobilized the soul power in his body, activated the short knife given by Master Ma, and stabbed it towards his head. Puff! The entire dagger was embedded in the giant frog's skull. This soul beast's vitality was not strong to begin with, so it eventually died. The soul beast died, and faint yellow light condensed on its corpse, then slowly floated above the corpse, forming a yellow ring. Even without touching the spirit ring, Li Xian could clearly feel the huge energy contained in it. Dinsu landed from the sky and said, "This is the spirit ring. Judging from the yellow light spot, this spirit beast has at least 200 years of cultivation. However, it is an animal spirit beast, so you cannot absorb this spirit ring." Yet, Li Xian stared at the 100-year soul ring floating in front of him, thinking to himself what a pity it was to waste a soul ring in vain. He knew that plant-type soul rings could also absorb animal-type soul rings. Suddenly thinking of a possibility, Li Xian touched the soul ring in front of him and quietly adjusted the time in his heart to verify an idea. As he suddenly opened his eyes again, his eyes were full of anticipation as he looked at the spirit ring. Suddenly however, a gust of wind blew, and the yellow soul ring in front of him dissipated in the wind, leaving no trace on the spot. This. Li Xian was stunned on the spot. After a soul beast dies, its soul ring can only exist for 1 hour. This one, dissipated a little too quickly. Director Luo scratched his head. Li Xian suddenly realized that he had changed the spirit ring for 10 years, and it just disappeared. Oh, it would be great if it could be changed directly. But Li Xian was not discouraged. He had not tried to update the time of the spirit ring in his body, and he was still looking forward to it. Not good. Just as he thought of this, another gust of wind suddenly blew up, and Li Xian discovered that the wind just now came from a strong source, and countless fine leaves flew towards here. Ghost water aster. Be careful, it's a 100-year-old plant, don't let it escape. Su was flying in the air and noticed the movement at the first time. Below, Director Luo activated his soul skills to block all those attacks. Swoosh. The moment the soul beast appeared, Machino had already rushed out. The first and second soul rings on his body flashed at the same time. Not only did his body speed up, but the little snakes on his body also flew out. Li Xian looked at Ma Xiaoyunyo disappearing in front of him, and was stunned. Master Ma has also taken the wrong path. Snake soul beasts are more inclined towards the control system and can barely become the fierce attack system. Judging from Master Ma's first soul skill, he has obviously taken the path of the agile attack system. Su flapped his wings in the air and flew down, chasing after the soul beast that sank into the quagmire. Li Xian activated his purple demon eyes to lock on it and found that it was a creature with black leaves and stems and small purple flowers on its head. The fight just now disturbed it. This kind of soul beast has a low IQ, and sneak attack is its self-defense instinct. Li Xian, we caught it, come here quickly. Hey, a 200-year-old ghost water aster, you're lucky, kid. Upon hearing this, Li Xian immediately ran over through the mud and water, and Director Luo followed beside him to protect him. Hunting a 100-year-old soul beast is a piece of cake for 2 battle-hardened soul masters. Li Xian followed the same method, walked to the 200-year-old ghost water aster, urged his soul power, and stabbed the knife fiercely. The ghost water aster is almost as tall as an adult, with its outstretched leaf stems like vine whips. It has a round and flat head with no eyes, and clusters of messy purple flowers growing on top of its head. As an active creature, it only resembles a plant in appearance. Li Xian complained in his heart, what is the difference between plant-type soul beasts and animal-type soul beasts, aren't they the same? Ghost water aster was suppressed by 2 great soul masters, and it was easy for Li Xian to finish her off. With one slash, ghost water aster lay on the ground and gradually stopped moving. A light condensed and floated out from its head, and a circle of yellow soul ring was clearly visible, only a little dimmer than the giant frog soul ring just now. Follow the method I taught you and absorb the spirit ring into your body. It's not easy to find a 100-year spirit beast. This one happens to be a spirit beast with nearly 200 years of cultivation. It's just right for you. Machino urged. The maximum age of a cultivator's first spirit ring can be 400 years, but Machino believes that is dangerous, and a 200-year spirit ring is already very high. Li Xian nodded and raised his right hand. He closed his eyes and activated the thin soul power in his body. Then he condensed the soul power into his palm. Along with the green halo, a huge Qingxiu crescent moon vine grew out, and the strange chrysanthemum on the top exuded a holy breath. The soul ring swayed gently along with Li Xian's martial soul. Taking a deep breath, Li Xian focused his attention on his martial soul. As the century-old soul ring approached, he felt a tremendous pressure. The soul ring came to the top of Li Xian's palm, and then suddenly shrank and fell directly on his martial soul. Li Xian only felt a cold energy surging into his body, and a violent cold current washed over his bone marrow. In an instant, he felt a chill in his heart and his body was cramping slightly. Li Xian, focus on your martial spirit. Su gave a deep shout and Li Xian nodded heavily. The next second, Li Xian closed his eyes, and his consciousness was completely immersed in the fusion of martial soul and spirit ring. The soul ring entered the body and baptized it in an instant. Li Xian's meridians, soul power, and body all grew rapidly along with the cold current. What a comfortable power! Li Xian was slightly delighted. This was the transformation brought to him by the spirit ring. It also meant that the absorption of the spirit ring went smoothly. He officially became a level 10 spirit master. The martial soul in the palm of his hand finally absorbed all the power of the 100-year soul ring. The whole Qingxiu Xianyu vine grew rapidly, and black lines spread on the surface of the emerald green leaf stems. Looking closely, those features were similar to the lines on the surface of the ghost water aster. As the buds of the strange chrysanthemum at the top opened a little wider, the masculine aura it released suddenly became a little colder. However, a reminder of the more regular time appeared in Li Xian's mind. Breakthrough to Soul Master, the time will be set for 100 years, and all the setting times will be refreshed. 100 years? Has the original change time been extended? With almost no hesitation, Li Xian calmed his mind and immediately used his stabilization ability to deal with the yellow soul ring that his martial soul had just absorbed. Change successfully, critical hit, change period X100 in an instant, a violent cold current rushed out, sweeping through the internal organs, bone marrow, blood vessels, and every corner of the meridians, washing Li Xian's body. Li Xian was almost destroyed by this force, and a low and hoarse roar came out of his mouth. The ability to change the soul ring can actually have an effect on it, but Li Xian didn't expect that the change in the soul ring would be a critical hit, and his 100-year soul ring was changed to a 10,000-year soul ring. This force was too strong. Li Xian's body, which was only at level 10, could not withstand this explosive increase. His eyes turned black immediately and he fainted. Li Xian, Li Xian. At the last moment, he heard the anxious cry of Master Mathono. Li Xian's martial spirit automatically protected its master. The Qingxiu crescent vine guarded him. A circle of black soul rings was floating up and down around him. At this moment, Li Xian was no longer able to support himself and let his consciousness fall into the endless darkness. This is a 10,000-year-old martial spirit. Several gasps of cold air were heard in the air. Chapter 13. Li Xian opened his eyes again and found himself lying in a bright room. A gentle breeze swayed the transparent curtains in front of the window. However, he felt waves of tearing pain in his brain. He tried hard to hold up his body, and he also felt an uncomfortable tingling sensation in his meridians. Damn, how long have you slept? Li Xian cursed softly as the membrane on his lips tore open from being closed for too long. A light salty taste surged onto the tip of his tongue. Memories flooded his brain like an ocean, and Li Xian quickly recalled what happened before he fell into a coma. This is, hiss. Li Xian activated the Xian Tian Gong slightly, and a soul power surged out from his lower abdomen like a hot current. The vast soul power flowed into his meridians, and the pain made him roar. This amount of soul power? Li Xian was very surprised. How could he be so powerful? Oh, right, my 100-year spirit ring. Li Xian suddenly realized that he was renewing the age of his spirit ring, which resulted in a critical hit. The powerful force of the spirit ring knocked him unconscious. 100 times crit? Could it be that his 100-year martial spirit was fixed for 10,000 years and became a 10,000-year spirit ring? No way. Li Xian actually didn't expect that he could increase the age of the spirit ring in his body. After all, he had failed when he tried to increase the spirit power before. He took a deep breath and was eager to release his martial spirit. If it is true, it is too terrifying. The first spirit ring is 10,000 years old. Li Xian's internal condition was very bad, but he was able to maintain his basic soul power. He concentrated his mind and focused the vast soul power in his palm. A ray of emerald green light spread, dyeing the bed sheets green. Li Xian immediately saw his Qingxiu crescent moon vine growing upwards exaggeratedly, and as the martial soul was released, a circle of deep and dark martial souls slowly floated out and quietly hovered in the center of the martial soul. Li Xian opened his mouth in astonishment. This. Li Xian. At this moment, the door of the room was opened inward, a breeze blew in, and Matthew rushed into the ward in a hurry. When Machino entered the ward, the first person he saw was Li Xian, who was half lying on the bed and releasing his martial spirit. He naturally also noticed the 10,000-year soul ring floating on his martial soul. Matthew was over 80 years old and thought he had experienced a lot, but he was still shocked by the scene before him. His mind went blank and he was stunned for a moment before he remembered why he came here. You're awake, Li Xian. Grandpa Ma, how long have I been lying here? Li Xian put away his martial spirit and rubbed his head in pain. The light in the room was very dazzling. It would be better to say that everything he saw was dazzling. You were unconscious for a whole day, and it was Director Luo who carried you out of the forest. Li Xian, that day, forget it, you should rest first. After obtaining the first spirit ring, your spirit power and mental power will be improved simultaneously, but the improvement of the two in your body is too strong, and your body can't bear it. You still need to rest. Slept all day? Li Xian was slandering himself in his heart, wondering why he had been unconscious for so long. The mistress should have come by now. Machino came over and touched Li Xian's forehead with his hand. The low fever had subsided, and he felt relieved. He reached out and pulled the thin blanket up to cover Li Xian's neck. Grandpa Ma, my spirit ring, did you see it? Facing Matthew, Li Xian really wanted to know how outsiders viewed this matter, and he felt a little uneasy. Machino's tone was gentle, but his eyes were filled with excitement. Yes, as you can see, it is a 10,000-year spirit ring. Dean Su and I have studied it for a long time, but we still can't figure out the reason. We can only say that the world of spirit masters is too strange, and its unknown side needs to be explored. It seems like a good thing for you to rest and recuperate now, but we can't be sure if there will be other problems later. Also, Li Xian, can you tell Grandpa that your first soul skill has been created? Ma Shenyo believed that the 10,000-year soul ring that suddenly appeared on Li Xian's body might be related to some mysterious unknown. He temporarily attributed that unknown to the strangeness of the soul master world. However, while being shocked by the 10,000-year soul ring, Matthew was more concerned about Li Xian's physical condition. Was the 10,000-year soul ring absorbed stably? Was there any problem with his soul skills? These were things he was eager to know. Good. Close your eyes and carefully feel the connection between you and the soul ring. The Qingxiu crescent moon vine is like Li Xian's left and right hands. Just by sensing it, you can get the information about the soul skills. Yes. Li Xian was surprised. My first soul skill inherited the aquatic characteristics of the ghost water aster, which makes me immune to the slowing effect of the earth attribute. Moreover, the skills I can perform are also related to the swamp. I can't explain it. I haven't used it yet. It should be to summon a swamp, slow down the group and reduce attack and defense. As for attack power, it seems to have no effect. Li Xian continued to sense that after a martial soul obtains a spirit ring, its skills will go through a mutation process. Different martial souls will absorb spirit rings of the same attribute and their skills will be different. In addition, the age of the spirit ring will also bring great differences to the skills. It seems that his martial soul has absorbed the habits of the ghost water aster very well and evolved a group control skill. His first soul skill has no attack, but the reduced attack ability brought by the 10,000-year soul ring is equivalent to strengthening himself in disguise. Oh, that's not right. Just as Li Xian was sensing the first soul skill, he discovered two responses coming from his martial soul. The swamp skill just now came from the Qingxiu crescent moon vine, and from the buds at the top that were about to bloom, a mysterious inspiration was faintly heard. Could it be? Li Xian's heart was shaken and he checked the message immediately. Suddenly, he felt an indescribable excitement. It turned out that the swamp summoning just now was just a skill of the Qingxiu string moon vine, and his Qirong Tongtian chrysanthemum also produced a soul skill. This discovery surprised Li Xian greatly. What is the difference between his martial soul and his twin martial souls? As for the mutated skill, Li Xian found that it was similar to the flying leaf attack of the ghost water aster, summoning a large number of petals to fly and pierce the opponent, and after the petals hit, they can cause a speed reduction and defense reduction effect. It turned out to be a strong attack skill. Grandpa Ma. Li Xian wanted to tell this surprising discovery, but was interrupted by Ma Shenyo. Good. There is no problem, and it is a control skill. This is consistent with the direction we hope you will develop. Don't get excited yet. Your meridians and soul need to rest. Don't use your martial soul skills. When you recover from your injuries, Dinsu and I will help you study the use of skills. As for the soul power test, let's wait until you are discharged from the hospital. Don't worry about school. It's just the beginning of the semester, so the learning progress will not be too fast. You can catch up later. Yeah, I see. Li Xian swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. He would not tell Ma Shenyo for the time being that his martial soul could produce two skills on the same spirit ring. In this way, it would be good to use it as his trump card. You know, each soul master can only obtain one skill through the soul ring, unless he reaches the soul Douluo level. His body can withstand the power of the 100,000-year soul ring, and obtaining the 100,000-year soul ring is two skills. I'm only level 10, but each spirit ring can add two skills. This is too abnormal. Grandpa Ma, my condition doesn't seem to be that bad. I can get out of bed now. I'll go ask the doctor. We'll talk later. You must be hungry. Grandpa will prepare something for you to eat. Good. Ma Xiaonya walked out after finishing his words. This person in charge of the Wuhan branch hall was very busy with work during the day, but he completely gave up his work time to come to the hospital to take care of himself. Li Xian couldn't help but feel touched. On the other hand, he calculated the time to obtain the spirit ring. 2 days had passed since he left the Holy Spirit Village, and Xiao San should be here soon. We agreed to meet in Nottingham, and I can't break my promise. Thinking of this, Li Xian put on his hospital gown, got out of bed, and stretched his body. As expected, there was no big problem. There was just a little swelling and pain in the meridians in his abdomen. In addition, his head felt a little dizzy, and everything he saw seemed rough-edged, blurry, and clear. After making sure there was no serious problem, Li Xian returned to his bed and lay down. Soon, Ma Shenyo came back with a lunchbox. The food he prepared was very light, including lean meat porridge, vegetarian dumplings, mushrooms and vegetables, clear tofu, and a large can of yogurt. Li Xian looked at the pile of food on the bed and smiled helplessly. Grandpa Ma, can I finish all this? You are very weak. You need to eat more. If you can't finish it, take a rest. You can always finish it by eating slowly. Matthew Newell looked as if he was afraid that it would not be enough. Have to. Li Xian understood that Ma Shenyo would not leave until he saw him finish eating. Li Xian grabbed a few buns and stuffed them into his mouth, then picked up a plate of food and drank the tofu directly. It was almost noon when Matthew No. 1 had something urgent to do and left the hospital. Li Xian also tried his best to clean up all the food. After eating, his headache was relieved and he could see things more clearly. Food is the best way to restore qi and blood. With strength, Li Xian even felt that the minor injuries in his body were basically healed. Seeing that there was no one in the ward, Li Xian put on his shoes and tried to leave the room stealthily. They had agreed to meet in Nottingham City. If Xiao San couldn't see him, maybe she could find the ward. Li Xian didn't want to be seen in this state by Xiao San. Speaking of this, Li Xian planned to go back and change his clothes. Boom. Li Xian opened the door of the ward and wanted to take a look around. However, suddenly a figure came towards him and bumped into Li Xian, and the little head in his arms made a crisp and loud sound. SHH, it hurts. He rubbed his head and the petite figure in school uniform in front of him took a few steps back. Uxi. Li Xian tried hard to recognize her and found that the big-eyed girl with twin ponytails in front of him was Uxi. His right hand couldn't help but compare her head with his chest. Li Xian was stunned. After a good sleep, he seemed to have grown a lot taller. Before, Uxi could reach his chin. Are you here to see me? Li Xian felt amused and asked happily. He hadn't been home for 2 days, and some people in school cared about him. Staring at her feet with her big eyes, Uxi nodded timidly. She raised her head, her eyes bright and clear, and blinked at Li Xian. The other person's suddenly taller body made her feel unfamiliar. You actually found this place, did you miss me? Li Xian always said whatever he thought of, and Uxi blushed when she asked him questions. Li Xian didn't notice all this. He glanced around the corridor and while the nurse wasn't paying attention, he quickly took Yuexi away, not forgetting to close the ward door before leaving. The two escaped from the hospital along the safe passage, and then jogged all the way to the street outside the hospital before stopping. This journey had no effect on either of them. Li Xian absorbed the 10,000-year soul ring, and his physical strength increased terrifyingly, and Yuexi was used to running in the village since she was a child. This is for you. Running into the alley, Yuexi took out a set of clothes and a piece of cake from her backpack. Li Xian, I took your clothes too small. Yuexi said in a low voice. It's okay, I'll just ask Grandpa Ma to get me a few more sets. How did you find me? Isn't there class at school? Li Xian said thank you, put the cake in his mouth, then took off his hospital gown, removed the tag on his school uniform, and put it on in no time. Yuexi avoided his gaze and said softly, I guessed. Brother Su Yuntao said that Grandpa Ma was in the hospital. There are not many hospitals in Notting City, so I came here after class. Li Xian was silent for a moment, a look of slight surprise on his face. Guess? Yuexi found this place after visiting many hospitals. You didn't come back, and everyone was worried about you. Teacher Rura didn't tell us about your situation. Yuexi added. Everyone. Li Xian suddenly thought of Ma Xiaodong and Teacher Rura, and shook his head. You should be the only one who is worried about me, and he is not familiar with the others. He put his big hand on Yuexi's head and said, thank you. I'll treat you to a delicious meal some other day. I'm going to meet a friend. Come with me. Friend. Yuexi was pulled and tilted her head in confusion. I'm not the only one in our village who has awakened his martial spirit this year. Have you forgotten that you've seen him? Li Xian laughed. Yuexi still had many questions to ask, but Li Xian was very anxious and did not give her the chance to ask. She couldn't help but worry, is Li Xian okay? Why is he lying in the hospital? And the spirit ring, did you get it? Chapter 14. At the same time, in the southern part of the Tiandu Empire, in the capital of the principality bordering the Fasno province, the city of Barak. As the most powerful military gatekeeper of the Tiandu Empire, the Wuhan Hall in the city is naturally the highest level Wuhan Main Hall. At this moment, in the highest reception hall of the Wuhan Main Hall, two figures, one white and one black, sat on the main seats. The two figures closed their eyes and adjusted their breathing. Below them, a guard in armor was half kneeling. The guard said in a serious voice, Your Majesty Yuegwen, as you requested, I investigated the information of the child I saw that day. According to the information, the child's name is Li Xian, and he is from the Holy Soul village in Notting City. He is one of the only two children in the Holy Soul village who has successfully awakened his martial soul this year. His innate soul power is level 6, and his martial soul is Kasha Tora. Moreover, among the several people who appeared with him in the Wetland Soul Beast Forest that day, two were the Dean and Grade Director of the Notting City Junior Martial Soul Academy, and the other one was Matthew Nyo, the manager of the Martial Soul Branch Hall. As far as we know, Li Xian's martial soul was awakened by the Spirit Hall. It is a mutated martial soul. Kasha seed, as a medicinal herb, has the potential of food, so it was brought back to the Spirit Hall by the person in charge of awakening. Other than that, no useful information was found. Sir, the child named Li Xian doesn't seem to be particularly outstanding. On the main seat, the man in white slowly opened his eyes, looking ahead with his snow-white gaze. He held his chin with one hand, and his feminine voice echoed in the hall, I am very satisfied with your intelligence, but your analysis disappoints me. The guard below opened his mouth and said in panic, I don't know. The man in white snorted coldly, if I remember correctly, this year's martial soul awakening began in the summer. The child named Li Xian awakened his martial soul only a few months ago. You said that his innate soul power is level 6. Then let me ask you, where did he appear that day? This. Upon hearing this, the guard understood something and a layer of cold sweat broke out on his back. Idiot, he appeared in the Soul Beast Forest, accompanied by several managers of our Spirit Hall, which proves that his soul power has reached level 10. He is here to obtain soul rings. The man in white shook his head, his eyes deep as he said, in just a month, he has cultivated a herbal spirit to the maximum level. Do you think his spirit is as simple as Kasha? Are you insulting my intelligence by saying that it is not outstanding? Sir, calm down. I know I am wrong. The guard was so scared that his body was shaking. The lord sitting on the seat was none other than the elder of the current Pope's palace, Chrysanthemum Douluo Yuguan. As a titled Douluo, His Majesty Yuguan was not only of a very high rank, but also in charge of the punishments of the Spirit Hall, and his power as Ghost Douluo was the highest under the Pope. If he fails to fulfill his duties at work and angers His Majesty Yuguan, he will surely suffer a miserable end. Ju Douluo Yuguan said in a deep voice, the mutant martial soul he awakened is definitely extraordinary. Go and observe his future growth. If there is anything, report it to me. Yes. The guard bowed respectfully and then placed his head on the ground. Anything else? Seeing that he didn't leave, Ju Douluo raised his eyebrows slightly. I have one more thing to report. Go ahead. The guard cleared his throat and said seriously, according to this investigation, I found that during the martial soul awakening held in the Notting City Martial Soul Branch Hall this year, another girl also awakened a strange martial soul. Moreover, it is an evil martial spirit called Phantom. Swish. As soon as these words were spoken, another figure on the main seat suddenly opened his eyes. His dark gaze was like a black hole, causing the temperature in the air to drop a few degrees. Keep an eye on her and report to me. Yes. The white-clothed man, Douluo, moved his fingers rhythmically, and laughed softly at the words, "What's wrong, old ghost? An evil martial spirit makes you so excited." Ghost Douluo said in a hoarse voice, "At the beginning, I was also identified as an evil martial spirit. And, have you forgotten that what happened on the day we met was as if it was destined? I think the appearance of those two children was not accidental." "Oh, really?" Douluo smiled faintly, looking forward with a vague gaze. "You and I are old enough, and we both want to take in a disciple. However, the two children are still young, so it's too early to discuss it now." Outside the gate of Notting City Junior College, two children wearing the Soul Master Academy uniforms walked over. The guard who was guarding the gate immediately stopped them and said, "Why are you two little guys here? You must be from the Soul Academy." Li Xian grinned and put his hands together. "Uncle, I'm here to find a friend, let me in." "Hey, I'm scared. Don't cause any trouble when you go in." The guard at the door seemed to have something to hide, so he did not embarrass Li Xian and opened the door. It is worth noting that there is a circle of black marks at the corner of the eye outside the door, as if he had just been beaten. Li Xian thanked him and dragged Uxi into the school gate. Suddenly he thought of something and turned back and asked, "Uncle, has there been any children from the Holy Soul Village reported in the past 2 days?" As soon as these words came out, the guard looked as if he had seen a ghost. His face immediately darkened and he cursed, "That kid just went in. What a coincidence." Li Xian was delighted. He suddenly remembered that Xiao San had an argument with the security guard on the day he reported in. Seeing the security guard with a bruised face, he was immediately sure that the person from the Holy Soul Village must be Xiao San. After entering the campus, Li Xian took Uxi towards the dormitory. Compared with the Soul Master College, Notting City Junior College was in a very shabby state. There is only one teaching building and the playground is overgrown with weeds. When he arrived at the dormitory, Li Xian was shocked to see that boys and girls were living together. Even though they were just children, it shouldn't be so unruly. At the same time, in the work-study student dormitory building, in front of class 7. Tang San calmed down and saw a half-grown child lying on the ground in front of him. "Now, can you move aside?" As soon as he entered the dormitory, Tang San was stopped by his roommates. After beating up a local tyrant named Wang Sheng, Tang San found that he could finally reason. This display of skill immediately impressed the other party. Soon, the student named Wang Sheng who was lying on the ground got up and came over to apologize. "I'm sorry for what happened just now. We working students are easily targeted, so we need to unite as one. Every newcomer needs to fight with the dormitory head after coming here." Tang San asked doubtfully, "So, you are just trying to intimidate me?" Wang Sheng scratched his head in embarrassment, "You are the one who is trying to show me your power, but you are really amazing. From now on, you will be the boss of class 7. Tang San was not interested in this, "I'm here to learn." Wang Sheng immediately walked over to flatter him, hoping that Tang San would not refuse. As a part-time student, he was looked down upon by many people in school. Tang San was very skilled, and if he could stand up for them, he would not be bullied in the future. These words also convinced Tang San, and he nodded reluctantly in agreement, taking over the position of the leader of the 7th dormitory from Wang Sheng. "Is this dormitory 7? Just at this moment, 2 voices were heard at the same time in front of the door of the 7th dormitory. Many people in the dormitory looked outside, and their eyes suddenly lit up. "I saw a pretty little girl walking in front. She had a slim figure, a pretty face and long black hair that was braided into a scorpion braid. She had a pair of big watery eyes and was looking around the dormitory curiously. Most of the students in dormitory 7 are boys. When they suddenly saw such a beautiful girl, they were all stunned. Inside the dormitory, Tang San was also slightly stunned. It turned out that this dormitory allowed men and women to sleep together. However, his attention was attracted by 2 figures behind the girl with scorpion braids. Those 2 people were wearing the uniforms of the Spirit Master Academy, 1 boy and 1 girl. When Tang